Today on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, two crime capers for the ages. But are they better with cops or capes? Michael Mann's Heat and Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight on the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all. Never saw each other before. They swap murders. Criss Cross.
Well done! I'm sorry, well done! A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections you may have never recognized. Today's first film directly influenced the second. But what are these influences and can we spot them? In Michael Mann's Heat and Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. My name is Aaron Wilson and I'm a filmmaker honing my craft.
And my name is Mark Clovis and I am a film watcher honing my observations.
If you like what you hear on today's show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/transcend entertainment. That's TRANSCEND entertainment. On today's episode, as always, we'll review our two films, and at the end, we go crisscross to compare and contrast them both. But first, Mark, what has been your media meal lately?
Well, I've been watching a little bit of this and reading a little bit of that, but the film that really stands out is I went to the theater and watched The Beekeeper. And I have to say that I may very well have gotten my worst film of 2024 out of the way because, oh my gosh, it was awful.
Yeah, I've heard.
It's have you ever seen Being There?
Yeah, that's actually on our list to get to at some point.
Well, The Beekeeper is like Being There if Chauncey Gardner was a homicidal assassin.
Oh my goodness.
Because
that's something.
It is because he goes through the film and he's constantly dispensing this beekeeping metaphor. It's like whenever he's talking with somebody, it's like invariably comes out. Initially, you think it's because he's a beekeeper, but then it turns out, no, that's his entire persona because of this organization and everything. And if these are spoilers, well, then clearly this is the first time you ever heard of this movie because it's like in all the advertising and everything. So he's doing this, and for a while there, it's kind of like I guess it's his condition. And then I realized, no, it might be a virus because people encounter him pretty soon. They're all using this beekeeping metaphor. It's like it just fills the film. Oh yes, the beekeeper, the beekeeper. It's just, it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's not the worst film ever made. I will grant that. And if you like, kind of mindless action where lots of stuff gets blowed up, then you'll enjoy this film. But oh my gosh,
yeah, I've heard comparisons to John Wick.
It's
dollar store John Wick is what I've heard.
Yes. If John Wick was like this, there would never have been a John Wick 2, 3, or 4.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty much, you walk out of there like, I don't need to see this and it's one of those, it's so frustrating too, because it wastes so many quality actors. I mean, Jeremy Irons, I guess he had to repair a wing of his castle in Ireland because I cannot figure out why else he was so wasted. You have Gemma Redgrave. I mean, Josh Hutcherson, he kills it in the movie. And I don't mean that literally, but metaphor. I mean, he is just so good playing this company. I really didn't think much of Josh Hutcherson in the Hunger Games series, but I mean, it's like I need to see more. I need to see that TV show he did because I can't like Future Man, I think is what it's called. Because it's like watch. It's like he is really a good actor because he's playing alongside these very impressive actors, and I mean he's acting alongside Jeremy Irons, and he is toe to toe with an Oscar winner. It's just so impressive. So I took that as the positive from the film because it certainly wasn't going to be the film itself. So what have you been watching?
I've been watching, I guess it's a classic. It's probably not very well known, but it's a show called The Prisoner from 1967.
Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorites.
I think J.J. Abrams talked about it at one point, and I went and looked at it, and you can see the influence on his work very much. Very much a Lost type feel. And I even got some David Lynch type stuff in there, this was pre his work, I think.
Oh, yes.
And Christopher Nolan was actually working on adapting this at one point. And so it's influenced a lot of people.
Now, I'm assuming you were talking about the original 1967 one and not the
not the 2001 one. I saw a trailer for that. I'm like, that doesn't look so great.
It is not. And part of the problem is the fact that they resolve the whole mystery of it, which they never do in the original series.
Oh, in the show.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think makes it so magical.
Well, I don't want to give too much away
Yes.
about Prisoner because I want you to go in cold if you haven't seen it, because
Yes.
that's basically how I went in. And anyway, he's basically stuck in this place that it's like an escape room, basically, is how it came across to me. This would make a really good video game if you adapted this show. But that's about all I'm going to give you. I just want you guys to watch it. It's really cool.
And it's Patrick McGowan, who, I mean, near the end of his career, he did get an Oscar nomination for, to me, what was the one good thing about the movie Braveheart, which is his performance as Edward I. Brilliant performance, but he just never quite had the pro. And part of it, I don't think he really sought it out. I think that he had alcohol-ish troubles and I think some personal issues, but he just never really quite got. At one point he was approached to be James Bond.
Oh, really? Wow.
And he was like
he would have been good at it. When I see him from him in the show, he's great. Like, he's got this real defiant quality to his character that just comes across in every episode.
It's just really brilliant stuff. So go watch Patrick McGowan stuff, even in bad stuff like Baby, which was this awful 1985 film about a dinosaur in Africa. He's just amazing in it.
Yeah. Okay, so our first movie today is Heat. Just like always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. Now, our review of Heat.
Well, my first question is, what's your prior experience with it?
I have none. Just through the grapevine. I was aware of the diner scene, and I knew it was about bank robbers, and I knew De Niro and Pacino, and that's about it.
That to me, I mean, it's how so many people get exposed to the film, and yet rewatching it, I was thinking about how, in some ways, it does the film an injustice because it is such a good film. No, I take that back. It's a great film from beginning to end. Yeah. And you have these amazing set piece scenes. And of course, you referenced the first one, which is the diner scene, which was really a testament to the two actors because I read that they went into that unrehearsed. And then, of course, there's the famous robbery sequence in the middle, and which is to this day, it is iconic. But there's so much good stuff in between. And it's just so amazing to watch it play out.
Yeah. Well, the beginning of my notes for this is just basically people I recognized. The first of which was young Natalie Portman.
Yeah. I mean, this has such it has such a stacked cast. The phrase that came to my mind was murderers row. I mean, it's just like they have so many amazing actors, and so many of them are in these minor roles. I mean, Dennis Haysbert is in this important secondary role. And did you recognize the guy who plays his boss in the diner?
I did not.
That's Bud Cort.
Oh, okay.
Who has an acting career going back to the 1970s. He was in Harold and Maude. He has this great voice acting career. And he is in just 2 scenes.
Yeah.
It's a throwaway role. And they have I'm not going to say Bud Cort is a thespian of, say, De Niro's caliber or Patrick McGowan's caliber, but he is such a good actor. And he's just kind of just there.
Yeah.
In these minor roles. It's just there is not a bad performance.
I think it would be the same for Dark Knight, like all these small roles with all these crazy people in them.
Yeah. Although there in a couple of those, as we'll probably encounter, not all of them were actual actors. I mean, you have a United States senator who plays who's
right, yeah.
So,
and then Danny Trejo, of course. And it was interesting. It wasn't until halfway through the movie that they say his name, and they say Trejo, and I'm like, wait, what? His name is Trejo? That's interesting.
I had to look that one up. It's like, I guess that is his character's name.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a slip that skipped that slipped in.
Slipped through past all the editors and the director and everyone. Yeah.
They're probably like, final cut. Oh, wait, refer to him by his actor's name.
Yeah.
Just pretend that is his character's name. So
yeah.
I had to wonder maybe if that was an homage because I know that was the time which Trejo was transitioning more into acting. He wasn't quite the celebrity he became, and I'm wondering if at some point he went from being in kind of the same way that Arlie Ermey did. He was a consultant. They're like, "Hey, you're so good at this. Why don't we just have you do the movie?"
Yeah.
So we're going to do the homage Trejo, but we just have it played by the man himself.
Yeah, that's funny. So they open with the bank truck heist, and it's a really good scene.
And I said that one of the things I appreciate most about this is as I was rewatching it was that unfolds so patiently.
Yeah.
You don't start with kind of like, it's not it doesn't open with an action scene the way that, say, The Dark Knight kind of does.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you start seeing them. It's kind of like setting up a chessboard. This piece, and then you're watching it all unfold. Michaell gets off the metro rail. Criss, Val Kilmer's character, he buys an item, and then of course you cut to, and then you get this disruption because it cuts to Vincent Hanna, Al Pacino's character, and how you see his morning routine. It's like gradually introducing you to this.
Yeah.
It's laying it out. It's setting the board, and then the heist.
One of the most interesting things that's going to be a parallel with The Dark Knight is they have a big semi-truck that they use for the heist. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, if you've seen The Dark Knight, you'll probably know what that is already, but I'll get to it in Criss Cross. And one of the first people we're introduced to is Waingro, mm-hmm. who comes into the truck with, I forget the character that is driving the truck. But
that's Michaell Chirito, Tom Sizemore's character, who's part of the core team who've been working together. Waingro's a new addition.
Yeah, he's a new guy. Yeah. And we'll see that he's not such a good addition to their team.
That was one of the things I didn't realize until I rewatched it to do this, which was you realize they're underscoring that Waingro is really a class apart as a criminal.
Yeah.
That Michaell, Robert De Niro's character, Criss, Val Kilmer's character, Michaell, Tom Sizemore's character, Danny Trejo's character, they're all professionals and they behave professionally. And then you get Waingro, and he's ruthless and he's psychotic.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that, or they think they can handle it. And then you have, what happens during the heist itself when Waingro basically decides he's got to, kill this guard for, staring at him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they have masks on, mm-hmm. and you can still tell what his intentions are. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's the music, and they have this rising violin mm-hmm. sting to it, of very similar to The Dark Knight, also. Mm-hmm. And you can tell exactly what he's thinking, and you're like, oh no, like don't do it. And he does. He shoots all the guards of the truck.
And you could sense it coming with that scene where Waingro first gets into the truck with Michaell, where Waingro, he's nervous. He's kind of doing the patter, is this your first time, blah, blah, blah. And Michaell's he's just like the cool professional. It's like, stop talking.
Yeah.
It's like, he's just kind of like, we don't need this. And that right there kind of anticipates what happens where, the guy that loses it is the guy who, even though he is a bad guy, he's kind of, he's an amateur compared to this team.
And so the heist goes south, and after the heist, they go to a diner, and there's a lot of diner scenes in this movie.
That is something else that stood out after watching it again.
And De Niro's character smacks him across the head and calls him out for killing all the guards. And this really started to get me on De Niro's side. It's this isn't such a bad guy. And this is kind of going to be my tune for most of this movie.
Yeah, there's an element of De Niro's character, which is, and you see it in Hannah's character as well, in Pacino's character as well, and it's the modern phrase of competence porn. That these mm-hmm. are two people who know exactly what they're doing, and you first see that I think with Hanna when he shows up at the scene after the robbery. This is before the diner scene, and he's there. The LAPD's on the scene. Their efforts to intercept Macaulay's crew have been frustrated. And they're dissecting it, and Hanna, he shows up, and within 5 minutes, he is describing what we've seen. That he is basically, assessed the scene, seen what's going on, and he basically describes what we've seen, so we know it's accurate.
Yeah.
But he's basing it simply upon the clues at hand, so we know he is good. And we know his team is good, and that is one of the things that I can't appreciate. How what we're seeing is not so much as cops and robbers, as we're seeing two crews against each other.
Oh, yeah. And the first one he speaks to on that crew is Ted Levine. And that took me out for a second because it felt like, I don't know if you've seen the TV show Monk. Uh-huh. And anyway, he's the police chief in that show. It just felt like Monk to me. But
did you read how he was cast in the movie?
No, I didn't.
Apparently, Mann approached him about playing Waingro, and he would have been an awesome Waingro.
Yeah.
But Levine, and I totally get this, he's like, I do that all the time.
That's his type.
Yeah.
I mean,
he
like Silence of the Lambs
exactly.
type thing. Yeah.
And he said, I don't mind. I want to be in the movie. I just don't want to play the same guy I always play. So that's why he got cast as a cop.
Yeah.
So and it was just such an interesting and of course he kills it. And I'm wondering to what degree that helped set him up for something like Monk. Oh wow, he can't just play. He doesn't just play criminals. He plays cops too.
I'm sure they wouldn't have cast him had he not been in roles like this before.
It's just an example of how stacked this cast is. And these people, how you could easily see how so many of them could have played the exact opposite side. I mean, you have somebody like Wes Studi, who is so good as a cop. I could easily have seen him in any of the roles in the crew. It's like, because they're so versatile as performance. I could have seen Amy Brenneman in Naomi Judd's role and vice versa. I mean, not Naomi. Ashley Judd,
yeah.
Ashley Judd's role and vice versa. I mean, they're just that good.
Yeah, and then I can't remember. It's hard for me to remember orders of scenes, but anyway, soon after the robbery, we get to a parking garage where he talks to
Nate, the fence.
Yeah.
Oh, that's John Voight.
Yeah, John Voight. Yeah, he talks to John Voight, and the lighting in that scene is where I first noticed the cinematography. Like, there's this orange sunset outside the parking garage, and it's just this white lighting that's on them. It just chef's kiss.
No, I missed that part.
Yeah.
I mean, I picked up a couple of scenes like that, but I totally missed that contrast.
Visually, it's very similar to the garage scene in The Dark Knight, where he comes in on the tumbler while Scarecrow and the Russian mob are doing their deal. I don't know if that was an influence or not, but it happens at about the same time in the movie. So, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I was struck by when you get to that point of the movie, and which is when it's like after you have the initial crime take place and the investigation is underway, and then you go back and you see their home lives. And you see, De Niro's home, which kind of raises the question, maybe crime does pay.
Yeah.
But it seems like nobody in this movie has a happy marriage.
Yeah.
Because you have Hannah is with his wife, and this is one of the recurring points they return to plot points, which is how his marriage is falling apart. And then you have Criss and his wife Charlene, and that's Ashley Judd's character, and how they're fighting. She basically has this plan, and Criss is kind of, you get the impression that Neil saved him. He's not just the head of the crew. He's kind of like their father figure, and he kind of helps them. And even though Charlene kind of resents it, Criss goes to him when they've had a fight. When he and his wife had a fight, he goes and he crashes at Neil's house. It's a sense that he also is watching out for his team. He watches out for them in a way that's very admirable and very respectable. But it's just, there's this thing that also you see in the movie, which is the degree to which these people, it's like how they get consumed by this life. And you see it. You see it with. Later in the film, we'll be getting to that scene, I'm sure. But you see it with this. There's not a portrayal of a healthy, successful relationship. The closest you come is where it starts out with Neil meeting Edie, Amy Brenneman's character, and how initially, even when she's doing this thing where she's flirting with him, she's seen him at the bookstore buying the book on metals, and she's trying to flirt with him. And his first response is, "Why are you doing this?" He instantly is in kind of this defensive, you must be a cop mode. Yeah, and it's only when first of all, how often does a woman of Amy Brenneman's caliber flirt with a guy? And of course, and then his first response is not, "Oh wow, there's this attractive woman who's flirting with me." His first response is, "You
a cop?" Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that scene was really tense for that reason. And there's suspense to that of we know he's a criminal, and we've just seen what he's done.
Well, the way what occurred to me is just how he's been conditioned by his life.
Yeah.
He is such a career criminal, just in the same way that Hannah is such a career. He's not even a cop, and this gets to something he talks about later. He's more of a hunter,
right?
And how that's how they view everything, and how they just they can't get past that. I mean, they could have easily titled this movie "The Life," and I think it would have been just as fitting in terms of what not just the two men, but the two crews from where they're coming.
Yeah, and the way he handles his jobs, like really coming down on that guy. I mean, they were gonna shoot him and put him in the back of a trunk. That was kind of
the diner scene.
That was a bit excessive for me, but it shows like he doesn't take nonsense like killing all the people, and it's like that gets you on his side, and then it really gets you on the side with this relationship with her.
But I want to go back to the diner scene one last time.
Yeah.
Did you pick up on the foreshadowing of what they were going to do to Waingro?
I didn't know.
Michaell comes back from his meeting with Nate the Fence, and the members of the team are there. Waingro is the only one eating.
Oh, okay.
They're saying they know what they're going to do to him.
So they don't have much of an appetite.
Much appetite. This is part of the job for them is taking out Waingro. And Waingro, he's just so oblivious to this. He's just kind of eating, so they smack him and everything, and they're about to take him out. Of course, they get distracted, and Waingro gets away. And, of course, that becomes that kind of sets up what's going to happen throughout the rest of the movie, which is Waingro is this persistent gadfly, this gremlin, constantly interfering with their efforts to do what they do so well. Because it's hard to imagine Hannah ever catches Michaell without Waingro trying to constantly throw a wrench into what Macaulay's doing.
Yeah.
So
it shows more that he's good at his job too.
Because he almost succeeds.
Yeah. Let's go back over to Pacino. Forget the names. Well,
Hannah.
Yeah, let's go over to Hannah for a second. This made me like him. He's like, Lauren's dad didn't show up, and like that thing of he's a better dad to her than her actual dad is, and that would. Well, I don't want to spoil it.
It's like the phrase, he's not a stepdad, he's the dad who steps up.
Yeah.
But you have, young Natalie Portman. I think this was the first film she did after The Professional. And
nice.
So she's so young in it. And again, it's a minor role. And you have to think, here you have, Junior had won his Oscar at this time. So you have these two, or had he? I'm trying to remember when Scent of a Woman came out. I keep wanting to say it's late 90s, but it might be earlier. But you have these two, Oscar caliber actors just kind of, and it's such a small part of the movie.
Yeah.
And they both just nail it. So, but I'm not as big of a fan of Hannah, and it's not because of the parenting thing.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll wait till we get there.
Yeah. But that at first at least got me some sympathy for his character. I mean, he's the cop, and you think you'd side with him more, but you don't end up doing that. So then the scene at the diner where he meets
Nate?
Where he meets the lady.
Edie.
Yeah, the scene where he meets Edie. There's this shot in there where it goes across the counter. This is after he's changed, or this is like right when he changes gears, basically. He's like, you a cop to, like this lady's actually interested in me. And it shifts across the counter, and now it's hard to explain visually. It's in words, but before they basically, they're close-ups. They switch sides with the close-ups because we're now on the opposite side of the counter, and so she's on the, you'd have to look at it, but if she was on the left, she's now on the right, and if he was on the right, he's now on the left. And it's just interesting. Like, that's how you use cinematography. It shows character dynamics of, he's in a different place now.
Fascinating. I totally missed that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Cinematography, I'm going to be talking like crazy in this movie because that's the biggest influence on The Dark Knight. So.
And it's visually it's one of the amazing things about this movie. And of course, from that scene, we also discover how quickly Michaell moves, because it's, before the night is over, he's at her place, who, I have to say is a really nice place for someone who works at a bookstore.
Yeah. They all have really nice houses.
That is very true. Yeah. I like how they explain why Hannah, who is a lieutenant in the LAPD, has such a nice house. It's his wife's house from her previous marriage.
Oh, okay.
With Natalie Portman's character, or as the daughter, but yes, that's where I was like going back to, Macaulay's got this, seaside view, and Criss has got a nice house. It's like, wow,
Pays to be a robber
It
or,
does, especially at that
or a
caliber,
police officer, I guess.
where they're hitting all these high profile things and got this nice smooth organization in place. Where you start to see the first effort. Waingro is the first thing that trips it up, but then you also have this deal that goes sour. With again, amazing how they could just have these great actors in my roles. William Fichtner's in it, and he plays this guy.
Yeah,
Roger
he's in The
Penn.
Dark Knight too.
Yeah, and he's and they go to him, and I love how it's so this guy who they're actually giving him a great deal. He's actually going to make money on this deal. The guy he gets stolen from is going to make money because he doesn't have to. He's reported the crime. He's going to get the insurance for the bearer bonds or whatever the MacGuffin is that they steal. And then they're also going to sell it back to him for like half, a fraction of the cost, like 80 cents on the dollar, 70 cents, because it's a safer deal for them. And then what does Van Zandt say to his thug? And you see who played his bodyguard?
I did not know.
Henry Rollins.
Okay.
Yeah, so who is such a fascinating personality in his own right. And he basically he treats it as not, hey, I'm actually going to make money. This is a great deal. He's like, oh, I got to show that these guys can't steal from me. It's kind of the difference between the professional of Macaulay and his fence versus the amateurism of a Van Zandt and a Waingro, where Van Zandt treats this as his masculinity is being challenged, his status is being challenged. He's got to respond by taking by getting revenge.
Yeah.
He has to make an example out of Macaulay, but you're not going to make an example out of Macaulay.
That date scene, you said it goes really fast. I think that might have to do with his rule of he doesn't have anything you can't leave in 30 seconds, is what he says.
And yet he violates that rule, I think, in one key respect. And this is something else I took from the movie, which is that the men in the movie have closer relationships to each other than they do to the women. You have
that's true. Yeah.
You have the way that Criss goes to Macaulay, the way that Hannah is he shares more because he had that scene with his wife, and she's basically talking about how he never lets her in. Well, he lets his men in.
Yeah.
I mean that's who he is, and they're part of his life, and the women in his life are excluded from that. And you get that from Natalie Portman's character in the fact that she never connects with him. She goes to him, but she never really accepts him. You see that early, and she's not accepting him as her father, and it may be because he's not letting her in.
Yeah.
But it's just so while Macaulay talks about how you need to be able to leave everything behind, it's kind of one of these things where he's talking about it when he's got all the members of his crew have these relationships, which they really can't leave behind very easily.
Yeah.
Macaulay's the only one who is living it, and yet he's not living it because he's got these men. And later on, he basically is sort of saying, I might have to leave you behind if we do this job. It's your choice. And they all choose to go with him. It's because they have a closer bond. They're willing to risk their marriages, their lives, because they're closer to Neil than they are to these women that they've married. Also,
his new relationship with Edie is turning into something he can't run away from in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. That's really the one that's dramatized in the movie, but that's a really good point. Mm-hmm. That these guys have close relationships.
And you have that great scene later in the movie, and I'm sure we'll get to it, where he makes that choice that he does, where he could have made that choice to kind of he has these two paths in front of him. He chooses a particular path that will lead to his ruin. And at the end of the day, it's because he just, can't escape the life.
Yeah.
That's not who he is. Who he is this person who has to see it through. So,
yeah.
And I'd say one of the things that impressed me about this film is the number of subplots you have that don't seem extraneous. Because this is the point of the film where you learn about Charlene's affair with Alan Marciano, and that's Hank Azaria's character.
Oh yeah,
another very famous person, maybe not as an actor as such.
Very much a voice actor.
Yeah, voice actor.
Simpsons.
Yeah, this is back when he was with Helen Hunt, and he was on Mad About You and all that. But he nonetheless is a very famous personality, and he's in this role, and he does a great job with it. He plays kind of this smarmy guy,
sleazy guy.
Yeah, he's having this affair, and how that proves to be the key to kind of one of the ways that they unravel the group later on in the movie.
Yeah.
They get to it, which is. But Macaulay it kind of, I think, maybe underscores for Macaulay when he discovers that affair why it is you don't have those relationships, why you should kind of keep yourself loose, because look what happens. Criss has that, and she's cheating on him, and he's got to be the parental figure, and kind of for the sake, he's kind of intervening in both their marriage and the team, kind of doing damage control. It's really a neat thing, and yet it feels like it becomes such a it's not, and this is where I'm kind of getting into a little bit into my own comparison. I didn't always feel that way about everything in The Dark Knight. I felt like there's some things in there that you could have cut out and it wouldn't have changed the film, but you couldn't really edit out that relationship without editing out without taking out a vital chunk of the movie.
Yeah.
But then you get the exchange, and you get the benefit, I think, of why that relationship between these men work, because you have the scene where they're supposed to do the exchange of the bonds for the money at the abandoned drive-in theater, and Macaulay's there, and Van Zant's men are trying to kill him, and it turns out the entire team has got Macaulay's back. You have Criss as the sniper as the truck's trying to speed away.
Yeah,
and then there's
pretty good sniper too. He's
yeah.
running and sniping the guy at the same time.
And then Michaell shows up with a shotgun, and they take out the team, and then Hannah gets on the phone with Van Zant and says, like, I'm talking to an empty phone. He says, I'm going to get you for this.
Yeah.
And then you're starting to see how it's getting a little away from Macaulay, because Hannah's crew comes on, kind of figures out who he is, and this is where he plays out the contrast. You have the Macaulay at his dinner. He sees his family, and there's echo to that later on where Hannah and his team, they're out and they have dinner. You kind of seeing how it kind of underscores their similarities.
Yeah.
But in how, at the end of the day, they do have these lives, but they also socialize, and they're a very tight crew, both of them, both the cops and the crooks.
Yeah, that's kind of a theme that's going to get a lot bigger near the end. But just the similarity between cops and crooks, that's interesting.
You set that against what Waingro does, where he doesn't have anything like that. There's a prostitute, and he kills the prostitute.
Yeah.
And, of course, you have one of those minor little what a coincidence where Hannah picks up the case, and he's there and he consoles the mother. But it really underscores the degree to which Waingro is not healthy.
Yeah.
He's just really a despicable person. You cannot possibly root for him.
Yeah.
Because he's really the most evil. He's like just the one truly evil character.
Yeah, he just loves it for the thrill of it or whatever. He's a serial killer type guy.
He's psychotic. He loves the power of death. I mean, he killing the guard, helped make him feel like he was a big man. He kind of made feel like he achieved something. Whereas everyone else is kind of like, that's not what you do, because it brings the heat. So, but Hannah's crew being on to Macaulay's crew means that they're on to this job that Macaulay's doing, and they're heisting these precious metals. And this is one of the issues where I'm kind of I had a problem with the movie, because Macaulay's crew, they're heisting the metals. It's all going smoothly. The LAPD is on the scene. They got SWAT ready. They're going to storm in. They're going to catch these guys. And Macaulay his spider senses tingles, and he kind of feels like they're onto him. And so he just tells the crew, we need to walk away.
And there's this great shot where it goes from they're monitoring him. They have him on camera. They've got him in a close-up at this point, and he's standing watching on guard outside. All his crew is doing this heist, and one of the police officers bump the side of the van. Pacino is like, he turns and he looks, and then he looks back, and it's like they're staring each other down. There's a great moment, and this is where they really start to. They haven't actually seen each other yet, but this is where the characters first really encounter and connect.
Yeah, they sense each other, and you get a sense that they maybe kind of the sense that animals in the wild sense.
Oh, yeah.
the leader of the opposite pack. It's like they're on guard, but
Yeah.
still it's a little implausible. But there's something else that happens in that scene that I just kept returning to for the rest of the movie, because as they're walking away from the scene, from the heist, the head of the SWAT team or some other, I can't remember. He's basically in charge of some component of the LAPD team there, says we should grab these guys. And Hannah's like, what are we going to get them on? We're going to get them on B&E. And this is my Pacino. We're going to get them on B&E, and they're going to be in for 6 months, and that's it. No, that's not good enough. You think about everything that happens for the rest of the movie. It is a consequence of the fact that, because they had him on a crime. They could have arrested him. Had they arrested him, it would have busted up all these plans they had for the bank robbery and, everything that happens. So basically, from that moment onward, everything that happens and all the bad stuff is because Hannah could not settle for getting Macaulay on just that.
Yeah.
And so
Get him on the big thing. Yeah.
all the deaths, all the damage, all the crime is because Macaulay's like, it's not good enough to get. It's because Hannah's like, it's not good enough to get Macaulay on just the B&E. We got to get him on something bigger.
Yeah. This is a good time to mention I was not a big Pacino fan in this movie. I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff, but I was watching him in this, and I'm like, okay, the big Pacino-isms. I'm not.
There's something that supposedly in an earlier draft, Hannah has a cocaine addiction.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
And I don't know if they wrote it out because they were changing it or they decided to make it subtle. But it makes the bombast in Pacino's character
make more sense.
Yeah, it fits better. I mean, and Pacino, I think he's a fantastic actor, and I love him when he plays quiet. I mean, you want to see quiet, look at the first 2 Godfather movies. Because I think there's like 1 or 2 scenes where he rages, but other than that, he just plays this very tightly wound, tightly controlled person. It's the thing that kind of bugs me later as he goes on to his career. He starts to indulge the bombast more. You have like absence of malice. You have scent of a woman, and he does go loud.
Yeah, it becomes his thing.
Exactly, and it's just when I think he's so much. I prefer the quiet stuff more because you could see I love it when he's coiled and he's holding in it because it's so much more interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, it's easy to be loud.
It made me feel like he's not a real person, and It's like, okay, I'm not on this guy's side.
He's a caricature.
Yeah.
It's something I sometimes think about with leadership, which is that about how these leaders who get these reputations for being rages. You see this sometimes in the military where these people get monikers like Howlin', or this idea that they're because they become known for their temper tantrums, and that's a form of leadership, I suppose.
Yeah,
and you get the impression that that's kind of, but it's I don't know of anybody who says it's an effective form of leadership.
Yeah, it doesn't get much devotion from your men.
But it's also interesting that Hannah never lashes out that way against his team.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it's just against the guys they're questioning.
Guys question him, or he's trying to intimidate somebody. Also, he never does it against. Actually, I take it back. He does do it against the team when later on when right before the big bank heist when Macaulay's crew escapes their surveillance.
Oh, right, that's true.
But apart from that, he never does it with Macaulay. He's always that encounter they have. It's very quiet. I think it's one of the things that makes it such an effective scene. But we'll get to that.
So after this heist or failed heist, they have there's a line from the LAPD during this that he's like, I'm not taking the heat for this, like them losing the mission. And I'm like, is that what the title's from? But then it comes to the scene after that, and the crooks are talking. He's like, how were the LAPD onto us? Where the F did this heat come from? And I'm like, oh, that's where the title's from.
There's a reference to it earlier when Criss and Neil are having the conversation after Criss has slept on Neil's floor for the night. But it is that recreation. And of course,
Must have missed that.
And it comes up again, of course, during the famous diner conversation. But that's where you get to Macaulay making the decision, and I love the way he does it. He basically says to his men, "Okay, I want to do this job." He may be thinking about Edie and the future, but he says to them, "I'm not going to tell you to do this. You choose to do it, but he's basically saying to them, I'm not going to force you to do this. He's not, basically dictating to them.
Yeah.
And he's very clear. I mean, this is going to be high risk, and this because it hasn't up until now, the LAPD hasn't been on to us, and they're like they trust him so much. You could even say they love him so much that they figure if he thinks it's worth the risk, then it's worth the risk. I mean, you actually had that exchange overtly with when he talks to Michaell, and after Criss says he's going to do it, and Michaell says, "Yeah, whatever you say," and Macaulay says, "No, you have to." You have to realize what this means, and then Michaell rephrases it, but basically it's the same thing. He trusts Macaulay so much, he loves Macaulay enough to where he's like, I know you're not gonna get me into something that you can't. At least there's not a chance that I won't get out of it, or that I can get out of it. So then you have, of course, the next scene, which is where Macaulay's team flips the coin on Hannah's team, and they start scoping them out.
Yeah.
And it's just so well done.
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shot of them standing around by the
Shipping containers.
Yeah, the shipping containers. That didn't give me a Dark Knight vibe, but it gave me an Inception vibe, where you have these dream scenes and these urban areas where they're just standing around like a film crew. It really has nothing to do with anything, but yeah.
And there's something that, I mean, you watch the scene, and Hannah, at the end of it, when he realizes what's going on, he's almost happy. And it wasn't actually until just now that I realized that there's a subtlety to it. Because after Macaulay's crew walks away from the heist, Hannah's team has Macaulay's crew, they on their site, but they don't know what they're doing next. And that's when Hannah goes to Las Vegas and starts intimidating Hank Azaria's character.
Yeah.
And that's the point actually where I started to wonder if Hannah was the bad guy, because I'm thinking he's physically assaults Hank Azaria's character
out of his jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got the Las Vegas cop there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, who doesn't say a word, but he physically twists Hank Azaria's arm behind his back. He then screams at him. He doesn't read him his rights. He bullies, and that's where you're kind of like, okay, Macaulay that doesn't do that.
Yeah,
that's Hannah. You could say it's cocaine, but it also is kind of like Hannah's not exactly a saint here. He's kind of breaking the laws himself and doing things he shouldn't do. But it gets to the fact that when you're on the hunt, and maybe that's another alternate title you could have had for the movie, that things like trivialities don't matter. It's about catching your foe.
Yeah, getting your guy. There was an interesting line here. I don't know which scene it was in, but he's like, I don't know how to do anything else. Macaulay's character, and I related to that. And I'm not in a bank robbing way, but for filmmaking, that's basically how it is. Like, I don't know. I can't see myself doing any other job, and it's a sucky place to be in. But that's where most filmmakers are. Of like, I can't see myself doing anything else for the rest of my life. But it makes it hard because it's like you can't get a normal job. But I mean, not that I haven't had normal jobs, but like I'm thinking
it's not
about
who you are.
Yeah, it's not who I am, and I don't get anything out of it. And it's like Taco Bell. I worked there, and I got fired before I got through the training program because it was just it was soul numbing. Of just I don't know. It sounds really pretentious, but
so much of life is about finding what's a fit for you, and that's one of the things that makes the movie so fascinating, is because when you were just describing that scene, I was thinking about a later scene where Hannah says the same thing to his wife, which is the fact that this is what they do. They are great at what they do. It goes back to that competence porn thing. These are two people who are at the pinnacle of what they do.
Yeah.
Hannah is, for all of his many flaws, he's lieutenant for a reason. Macaulay, his crew of professionals trust him for a reason. They are so good at what they do, and it is such a perfect fit they can't imagine doing anything else, to where both men, by the end of the movie, will abandon their relationships with women because of what they do. They basically will say they will prioritize who they are in these roles than anything else about themselves. They actually make conscious choices. This is what defines them: being a cop hunter versus being a type A crook.
Yeah, and that's probably a lot of where their relationship comes from. It almost becomes like a bromance near the end of just they have such an appreciation for what the other does, but they're like, oh, I'm getting to the diner scene.
Actually, we're at the diner scene.
Are we at the? Oh, perfect timing.
Because Hannah gets home and his home life is so empty, and you have to wonder about the whether this is really the best use of police resources, where he has the LAPD helicopter pick him up, fly him to a car so he can chase down Michaell and say, well, go get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, the helicopter part didn't make much sense, but it's interesting.
But I guess when you're a lieutenant in the LAPD, it's kind of like, hey, I'm going to be late for my for this appointment. I'm going to have the LAPD helicopter pick me up and fly me, 5 miles or something like that.
Yeah. And so then he pursues him on the freeway. And this is an interesting point to mention of he is speeding like through this entire movie. Mm-hmm. And that might be the cocaine thing, but I don't know. That's the thing that turned me off to him of like, why is he so reckless and just, I guess not taking the cocaine thing out of it. I guess it would be like he's so determined that he wants to get his guy, but it's like, okay, but you're literally breaking the law all the time, speeding everywhere. Yeah,
he's so obsessed with his prey. Yeah, I hate to use that word because Michaell is not prey by any stretch.
Yeah,
but he's so obsessed with his target that every other consideration just goes by the wayside, including the law that he has sworn to uphold. So, but you get that. Oh my gosh! And that gets to the diner scene, and
so good.
It's fascinating to learn that they didn't rehearse it. They wanted to make it as natural as possible, and it is such because you think of all the levels. I mean, on the most basic level, you kind of step back a bit. You have these two acting titans, two of the iconic greatest actors of their generation, and it's its own form of competence porn. You're watching these actors, masters of their craft, doing it, but then you see the characters who are from opposite ends, but you really get the impression that they're the only ones who get each other.
Yeah.
All the women, even their subordinates, their colleagues, their coworkers, don't get it, but these two do. And this is only the first time they've actually physically met, but they instantly get this about each other.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that they came at it this way of they're just having this casual, non-confrontational, physically confrontational conversation, and it seems odd. It's like, well, he doesn't have anything on him, and he's playing it cool, like you can't get anything on me, copper. And but they play it in that way of it's just like a meeting of the minds almost. And there's a scene that's similar to this in The Dark Knight that we'll get to. But
do you know the origin of that scene?
No, I don't.
It has to do with the origins. This is a story that Michael Mann was obsessed with. Mm-hmm. It goes back to the 1960s. There was a Chicago cop and a Chicago crook. They actually had a meeting like that before the crook did a job where he ended up getting killed. And Michael Mann has been and I think this is one of the reasons why it's a quality of a movie as it is that Michael Mann has basically been refining this story for like 20 years before this movie.
Oh, wow.
There's actually a version of it. In the 80s, when Mann was all about TV, he had done... he was doing Miami Vice. He was doing Crime Story. He did this as a TV movie called L.A. Takedown, and currently it's available on YouTube, and it's worth watching. It is nowhere near as good as Heat,
right?
But he did it. I think they're trying it out as they were piloting it, and he was like, I don't want to, they're not getting picked up or something like that. But then he goes and takes it, makes it into this work of art. This isn't necessarily Mann's inspiration or De Niro and Pacino's inspiration, and they do repeat this scene in LA Takedown because the fundamental story is the same. It's not a shot-for-shot remake by any stretch. He definitely improves upon it in the movie, but it is nonetheless so especially when you watch LA Takedown and you watch the same scene. The actors are not terrible, but they're not De Niro and Pacino.
Yeah, yeah.
And oh my gosh, it's like when it's like that line about how it's not in this somewhere else, but how when you're really good at it, it doesn't look like work.
Right.
It just doesn't look like.
Yeah,
work.
it just felt like a conversation. Like even
Yeah.
as they were saying some of the lines near the end, I'm like, I've heard this before. And this is like, of course you've heard this before.
Yeah.
People have repeated this line over and over again. But that having not had that, it felt like a very normal conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But
And then it's like right after that scene, boom, we're into the job.
yeah,
And it is so well because it comes out of nowhere. And it's so you really get Hannah's reaction. And I just and it's the one part of the bombast that I really loved is when they're telling him like they've all slipped the surveillance, and he's like, "I was having coffee with him half an hour ago."
yeah.
Like-
I think it works there, but
Oh yes,
I don't know.
He's just so
Yeah.
gobsmacked by the fact that he's like, "What? How did
Yeah.
they do this on us?" But then of course you have, there's Waingro, connecting up with Van Zandt.
Yeah,
And it's like, Waingro's knowledge, Van Zandt's resources, they're going to go ahead and really, mess this up for Macaulay and his team. And that's where you get, the connection with Dan Breeden. I can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head.
I don't know.
He's another one of these, great actors who is in this and he's just like a great actor in so many things. And he's in this casual role, just, 4 or 5 scenes and he's there. And, Trejo says, I got to bow out, and later on you find out why. And so they just kind of like, on the spot, they, take the fry cook because he was an ex-con driver, and they incorporate him.
Yeah.
And it's such a smooth thing because they know he's good. They know him. It's kind of like, you don't have to, that's how good they are. They know the options. They can, on the spot, recognize that this is the guy we want on our team, and they can sell it to him. He's like, given the fact that he's being treated like garbage in his job.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah.
It was interesting. I didn't know why his character was in there until that point. I'm like,
Yeah.
why are they showing this random guy? But and then
Exactly.
he comes into it. Yeah,
It's like seeing all these threads and how over the course of the movie they all get tied together
yeah,
to make the
Tapestry,
image. The
yeah.
tapestry, yeah.
yeah. So that heist. Okay, let me talk about heists real quick.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 camps of doing heists. You can either show the plan or not show the plan. They go the not show the plan route, and the emotional impact you get out of that is everything they're doing seems really cool. With the show the plan part, you get more suspense because you know how it's supposed to go, and of course it doesn't go that way, and you're more emotionally on the edge of your seat. This is kind of in the camp of watching them do cool stuff. So
And what I was struck by watching it was the music, because it's how they plays out over this entire sequence, which is you have the music during the bank heist, and it's very kind of like it's just like it's like this one note.
yeah,
I'm sure someone who with better ear than mine can identify what they do with it, but it's kind of like it's very staccato. It's very kind of like the beats,
Yeah.
and it does a nice job of kind of this is playing to a pattern and it's happening and it's done where it's urgent enough to where you get the sense it complements nicely the sense of stress.
right.
Both, I mean the bank, the customers, the employees, they're stressed, and Neil, Chris, Michael, they're stressed as well, but they're professionals. They're managing it, and it's all going to plan. And Hannah's people have no clue what's going on.
Yeah.
The alarms have been shut down or gummied up somehow, and it's like this is going to work. And then just a random tip comes in. Of course, we know from whom, and all of a sudden, Hannah's people are like, we all got to rush down there. And oh my gosh, it is so the scene where they're kind of they're kind of trying to set up to the last minute themselves, and you get their professionalism, where they're able to coordinate with just a minimal with just just a few words and like go here. They're all set up, and it's like they might actually succeed in catching these guys.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty desperate for the criminals at this point because they've got like one machine gun against this. Well, we get to the roadblock part of this entire roadblock of cops, and he's just got this one machine gun going at them. It's like, yeah, they don't stand a chance at this point.
But then the moment Chris sees, I think it's West Studi's cop. It might have been McKelty Williams, and I can't remember which one of the two. And all of a sudden, boom, he lights up. Music stops.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to read about how they did this, about how they were Mann was so focused on realism. There's no dubbing. He simply had microphones everywhere to capture the scenes.
That's cool.
All the bullet holes are actual bullet holes.
That you can tell that in the scoring of it, because you just hear these echoes through the streets, and it's like, I don't know if there's not really any way you can get that sound except for on set while you're doing it.
And you think, I mean, if you go downtown in any major American city with all these skyscrapers, and there is that echoing effect that comes from it, and that's why it is so natural. It's difficult to imagine how that can be. I'm sure you can duplicate it with modern technology and everything, but still, it just adds to the realism of the moment,
the real sense of space.
Yeah. And then you have them, and it's just constant gunfire. It's like 5 minutes of just straight gunfire. There's almost no talking.
Yeah.
It's just, gunfire everywhere, and screaming and sirens and screeching of cars and explosions. It's just...
Yeah. And then this part where Pacino's running after them down the street, this close up of him as he's just running like crazy to get after these guys. I got a real Dark Knight vibe of, it's getting into Criss Cross, but this moment was very similar. I got the same vibe as Harvey Dent after the shooting in The Dark Knight, at the ceremony. Mm-hmm. And anyway, they had the same vibe to that.
I have to ask you about something. There is the scene when in the middle of the gunfight that they're in the car, and Macaulay's crew's in the car. They're trying to get away, and Mann does something where he slows down on De Niro, who I actually don't think had fired a shot up until that point, and how he just kind of gets this look on his face, and then he takes his M4 and he starts firing through it. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to, is he trying to communicate that Macaulay has made a choice that he hadn't made up until that point? Or
it sounds like that. I don't remember that happening, but that does sound like that.
It stands out for me because it's such a contrast with the rest of the scene. The rest of the scene is at normal speed.
Yeah.
But there's that moment of just like where it slows down and Macaulay takes the gun and he starts firing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that was like he was making a choice, or that was the moment where Macaulay was realizing that this is not going to end the way he thought it was going to.
It's probably this. If I had have caught this moment, I might feel more for his character at this point, because this is actually where I lost it with him. Yeah. Of as soon as he got to the grocery store parking lot, I was like, okay, I'm not behind you anymore, guy. Yeah. You're shooting past women and children, and
he's made it clear that when it comes to he does seem to want to minimize casualties, and I think it's professional. You saw that with the armored car heist,
right?
And then you see it when he's at the bank and he's trying to calm people down by saying, "We're not here for your money. We're here for the bank's money. Your money's protected. Don't worry about it." He's basically trying to, and of course that's convenient for him, but he does not want to hurt people if it doesn't have to. And that's the real contrast with him and Waingro.
Yeah.
But then he's not against hurting people when he needs to. And of course, you see that especially with Michaell at the end, where he takes a girl hostage. And that's where you're practically rooting for Hannah to kill him, which Hannah does. So, but man, after that, it's like, I think the best you might read in that is maybe that's the moment at which Macaulay decides that it's no longer about the job. It becomes personal. Because after that, that's when he's like, okay, I want revenge. Why does he have to go after Van Zandt? Why does he have to, figure out who did him wrong? Because at this point, he has got the heat on him.
Yeah.
And where he talks about how you have to give up relationships, don't you also have to give up
grudges?
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to survive. But he's like, he knows it's, Van Zandt. He knows it's probably it's probably Trejo who is the one who ratted them out, and so it becomes once he ensures that Criss is taken care of, and of course you saw who played the doctor, Jeremy Piven.
Oh, I recognized him. Yeah,
It's kind of like when he's blinking, you'll miss him role.
Yeah,
it again shows you how stacked the cast is. It's like once he ensures that Chris's wound is taken care of, he's going to be about revenge.
Yeah,
he literally does not have a scratch on him. Plus, they got money from the heist. They've got millions, and yet he's like, instead of walking away from the situation, he has got to, he's got to go after these people who've messed up. Maybe it's
Yeah, and
professional.
he almost has it. It's this beautiful shot of him driving down this highway, and then he goes into this tunnel.
Yes.
And it's got those bright fluorescent lights, and he's got the girl, he's got the money, he can go, but at this point he chooses not to.
Yes, and it's at the same time that Macaulay's life has fallen apart, so has Hannah's, and it's a small scene, but I want to point it out because Hannah comes home after the shootout, and there's his wife Justine, and he meets Justine's lover, and it's played by Xander Berkeley, who's another one of these great actors who is just great in everything he does. Xander Berkeley was the original Wayne Grow in LA Takedown.
Oh, okay, nice.
And I can't help but think that he deliberately is like, maybe Xander Berkeley is like, I don't want to play Wayne Grow again or something like that. Go talk to Ted Levine.
Yeah.
but Mann was like, or maybe it was like, hey, can I play Wayne Grow? And it's like, well, I'm going to talk to Ted Levine first, but hey, I've got this role for you. And it's just a nice callback to LA Takedown. But again, another example of how stacked this cast is. You can take Xander Berkeley and have him in just one scene, and he is such a good actor. So, but you have, Charlene the LAPD is on to her, and they're using her to bait a trap, and this crew is so slippery. It's like you're at this point in the film, and the only members of the crew that the LAPD have are the bodies.
Yeah,
it's the driver. It's Michael's character. Criss has eluded them. Macaulay's eluded them, and Hannah is just he's given up, and he's absolutely right. If Macaulay is the professional that Hannah has identified, and I think he doesn't realize how Macaulay has kind of not been true to himself, that he's engaging in this stupid revenge thing. So it's kind of like Hannah's like, we've lost, we've been beaten in essence, and then Macaulay beats himself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is really it's interesting. I wanted to get into this sooner, but I was curious who the main character was, because it's okay. What would you say?
Well, I mean, arguably it's both, but I mean, I have to say, given that the movie begins and ends on Macaulay, I'm going to say Macaulay.
Yeah, I'd say Macaulay too. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. It plays the down point for the detective. Mm-hmm. So that's usually what you do for the main character. And so, I mean, his wife's kicked him out. He just came in on his new lover with her, and he's got the TV from that scene.
Yes.
And he kicks it out the door, and his life is just out of control.
But then when he finds his stepdaughter trying with her suicide attempt in the tub at his hotel, and he gets her to the hospital, and Justine meets with them, they have that conversation, which I think kind of explains the very last scene, where she talks about reconciliation, and he has one line that I wrote down, which was that all I am is what I'm going after.
Yeah, it's very similar to his line, Macaulay's line of, I can't do anything else.
Exactly. Yeah. It's they're these obsessed, driven, focused people that are great at what they do, and it's like they've accepted, or maybe that they've internalized that they suck at everything else. They suck at relationships. They suck at living a quiet life. But then when you have, Macaulay, plugs Wayne Grow, and he does, and it's such a satisfying scene. Because if there's anybody in this film who deserves to have a bad ending, it's Wayne Grow. Yeah. And Hannah, chases him, and then you have that climactic scene at the airport. Oh, the days before 9/11, where you can just walk onto an airport tarmac.
Yeah.
And he, they have the showdown, and Hannah shoots Macaulay, and he just stands over him, and I'd never really looked at that scene until I watched it recently, and just the way he's kind of slumped. It's like Hannah he's won, and he has this posture of someone who's kind of like, he's empty. He's now that he's gotten what he's gone after.
Yeah, and we skip past real quick
yes,
him leaving Edie. It's him staying with his rule of, so he decides to not change. He's gonna not have anything he can leave in 30 seconds.
Well, I didn't see it as because I don't know if see that's where I questioned because I remembered it as being for some reason I remembered it as Edie leaving him, which might have made some sense when she realized what Michaell had gone to the hotel to do, but it was like Hannah saw Edie, and somehow again he just knew that this was connected to Michaell. Maybe it's because she was like when the hotel's being evacuated because of the fire alarm Michaell pulled.
Yeah.
And Edie's just sitting in the car. He kind of realized something might be up. And then I thought it was that Michaell comes out, he sees Hannah coming, and he takes off.
Yeah, he does.
Is he abandoning Edie, or is he?
Yeah, I guess that
Edie?
is another element that, but it's.
But I mean, frankly,
I don't know. There's kind of like three.
The scene leads itself
that.
to interpretation.
Yeah,
but I mean, and I think this goes back to something that.
But if he would have wanted to stay not with his rule of, well, I mean, the grudge thing, but
yeah,
but for in Edie's sake, like he would have just gone with her and been free and clear.
That gets to the scene that you're describing in the tunnel, which is where he was.
That's where he makes his decision.
Yeah, he makes the decision that he's going to prioritize the life over a life.
Yeah,
and it's a choice that ultimately leads to his doom, and also deprives Hannah of his purpose. Is he ever again going to face a challenge as great as Michaell? And you get the impression that that's it. He's third marriage over. The one guy who gets him, he's shot.
yeah. And the just real quick, the cinematography for that scene, those landing lights going on and off, it's just so, I don't know, it's good. It's like it's blinding them at the same time as it's making
blinding
really
and
good
illuminating them.
backlight for the character who's opposite, and it's just really good, really pretty looking shots. Basically.
But I mean, such a great way to end the movie, which is that it's you have a resolution of the conflict.
Yeah,
and again, all of that's because Michaell couldn't that Hannah couldn't settle for 6 months on a B&E charge.
yeah, and then he grabbed his hand as he's dying, and it's like, okay, well. I think that's more of a movie thing than it is an actual real life cops and robbers thing. In real life, they want to they want to get these guys off the street, and there's kind of a scarcity to it in this movie of like, if he was the only guy, you'd be like, oh no, like that's all I had, and now he's gone. It's like, no, go catch the next guy. Yeah,
exactly. He gets it's in the same way that when you like the dog catching the car, it's like, what's Hannah going to do?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that was our review of Heat. Now our review of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight. Okay, so this one opens like Heat with a bank heist.
Mm-hmm. A little bit differently paced.
Yeah.
Because you kind of launch right into it. And I think that was one of the things that underscore what I was talking about with Heat being kind of a very patient opening.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, you zoom in and all of a sudden, boom, the window of the building kind of blows out. And
you're into it.
Yeah, you're right into it.
I'm kind of wanting to compare them at this point, but I'll save that for Criss Cross. Yeah. I will mention real quick, the similarity is William Fichtner in that scene. Yes.
And again, it's such a small role and yet such a great one. I mean, there's a person I had not seen all of his performances, but of all the performances I've seen, I cannot think of one where he is just not on his game, at the top of his game, and just killing it. Just
he's so good.
Job. And frankly, just does not get the roles that he deserves.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he's another one who I could have seen in so many different roles in Heat. And frankly, I would have preferred to see him as Sal Maroni than Eric Roberts. And this is no shade on Roberts, and Roberts does a good job, but I think Fichtner would have been maybe just a little bit better because he's that good.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's just interesting to see how when you learn early on, who you should be focusing on, but then it's so easy to get lost in the mix of that scene with all the guys wearing the same masks and knocking each other off, and you don't know who is who. And they had that great throwaway line in the SUV when they're riding to the bank about how the Joker sets these out. So they're kind of playing this they're kind of lulling you into thinking that these are just guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you had that climactic scene between Fichtner and Ledger where the clown mask comes off and there's a clown face underneath.
Yeah, it's so good. That shallow depth of field shot of, I'm sure that was IMAX. That shot, actually, there is like iconic behind the scenes photos of them getting that shot. They're behind the diffusion, and so you just see the blurred out image of Ledger and the IMAX camera down in the corner.
Yeah, this is one of the ones I really regret not having ever seen it in IMAX because at the time I was not aware how much Nolan, incorporates IMAX into what he does, and that you watch films not in IMAX. I learned that I learned that lesson before I got to Oppenheimer, fortunately. But that I think it was fortunately was the first Nolan film I've seen in IMAX. But
and the head movements in the mask when he's doing the little twitchy bird movements with his mask, it cues you off early on of, oh, this guy's not exactly like the other guys. Maybe this is the Joker, and then it is the Joker.
The part of the scene that I enjoy the most is right before he takes off his mask, where they've breached the vault, they've taken out the money, and by now you know that these guys basically are shooting each other. I mean, more of the crooks die from the crooks because of the crooks than other people. And the guy with the money says, I suppose you're supposed to kill me. And the guy who realizes the Joker says, no, I'm supposed to kill the bus driver. And as he's saying that, he is subtly shifting his position.
Yeah, out of the way.
And then the guy goes,
good.
What bus driver? And whoosh.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, it is. It's such a great scene to start. And then you get to this hecticness. And something about the movie that kind of bugs me, and I feel this with a lot of Nolan films, is that there's such a frenetic pace to them.
Yeah, I was going to mention the pacing at this point. I was going to mention it in a positive view of just of he knows how to get in and out of scenes, but it does have that building thing to it of you've got to keep up, and it's yeah.
I mean, it works in the sense of scene setting, because you go from the bank heist to snapshots of the city. You have the scene with Scarecrow doing the drug buy with the Chechen, and you have the Batman wannabes, and you do have a great question, which frankly, is in itself worthy of a Batman movie, which is what gives Batman the right. And what was the? I can't remember what his response was. It was some lame response like,
because I'm not wearing hockey pads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess so. If you're part of the 1%,
because I'm a millionaire and I can afford this armor.
Exactly.
Yeah. There is the added thing of it though, that he's devoted his whole life to this, and these guys are like, oh, on the weekend I'm gonna go put on hockey pads, and yeah.
I feel like it's an explanation you see in so much of the material about Batman, the comics and the cartoons, which is this idea of why Batman should be a hero for doing this when other people who put on a mask are either nuts or themselves criminals. And Batman's true. Like, well, because I'm not wearing hockey. It's such a casual. I hate to use this word, but it feels like a waste.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it nonetheless kind of underscores how much the city has changed because of Batman. How there are people, and this is where it's so subtle. I must confess, I missed it until now, which is the fact that you are seeing how Batman is changing the city for the better, not in the sense of gun-toting vigilantes, but the very idea that people are now trying to stand up to crime.
Right.
As opposed to just kind of accepting it as part of their environment. And this gets to, I think, one of the differences between Dark Knight and Heat that is not so much a Criss Cross, but when Heat comes out in 95, you still have the sense of crime as being a major problem in America. You had the crime bill passed the year before, which funded thousands of new police officers. There's a sense that you have a real crime problem. It's right before crime declines. Mm-hmm. And when The Dark Knight comes out, crime is still declining. It's nowhere near the problem it was a couple decades before. And there is a feeling that, that we are able to turn these problems around. And The Dark Knight, to me, one of the themes seems to be that how we can rise up and deal with these things, overcome these things. This is really a theme of the entire trilogy. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I don't think enough people pay attention to, which is the notion of how do we take this miserable situation and make our community a better place.
Yeah.
And it's just that these guys are going about a little bit the wrong way.
Yeah, because in Batman Begins, it's basically like post-depression, like really everywhere slums and there's crime everywhere. Like you can feel it in the grime of the city, and it's like, I don't know if I'm sure it's intentional, but like they filmed mostly in Chicago during daylight in this movie, and it's like, wow, this is a better city for Batman having been here, but the crime is still,
as opposed to the first film where most of the scenes in Gotham are set at night.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's like things are getting brighter. You still have the crime. I mean, after all, the bank heist takes place in daylight, but
it's more in the field of the defense attorney and Harvey Dent at this point.
Yeah, Rachel.
And that's the route they're wanting to take. And they have that scene where they introduce Harvey Dent during this case, and they show that he's really good at his job, and he's an idealist. Yeah. So
he's got Sal Maroni on trial. He thinks he's about to, he has Sal dead to rights, and turns out not only is his witness, does his witness gum up the case, he tries to kill Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
And you see Harvey Dent's moves where he, takes the gun and just kind of just casually, scornfully, gives it to Sal Maroni and saying this is a, cheap Chinese knockoff. Next time, buy American. Yeah. Which, even though
so good. Yeah.
Maroni gets away with it, he's nonetheless, it's kind of like, he's not fixed his problem with Dent.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is just one of his problems, because he's also got this problem of the Joker hitting hitting the banks. And that's something we didn't mention with the bank scene, is that it's not just any bank that the Joker's crew's hitting. It's specifically a mob bank, which is why William Fichtner's character has a shotgun, which is not what your typical bank manager is armed with. You know?
They have the scene with Gordon right after that where he's talking to Harvey Dent. It's interesting. They have a subtle nod to his character, or who he's going to become. He's like, they got a different name for me at MCU. And he's like, I don't know about that. Yeah. And then they'll mention it later. But
you get the sense that these are people who are trying to figure out, who they can trust. It's Harvey Dent, Jim Gordon. They have the same goal. They just don't know if the other one is an ally, or is it going to be yet another disappointing example of the corruption of Gotham on display, the way that was with, say, Flass in the first movie. One of the things that Nolan does in these movies that you don't see as much of in, like, the Burton series, or in, I think, the most recent one with Matt Reeves, that Matt Reeves did, is how he uses his company to fight crime.
Oh, right.
And you see it in the first movie where where his dad, Thomas, used the company to fight poverty, with the infrastructure project, the train that Ra's al Ghul tries to exploit. But you have it's in the character of Lucius Fox, who, as I understand, according to canon, doesn't know that Wayne has this alter ego. But it's very clear from the first in Begins that he knows what Wayne's doing in his off hours. And but you have this deal that's going on where they're negotiating with this Chinese company, and it turns out that Wayne is not serious at all about this deal, but it gives him an opportunity to figure out that these are the guys who are laundering the money, and and so he's basically he's in some sense, you got to argue, he's risking his company just so he can do Batman.
Yeah,
that he's going to sit here and put exploit his company in a way that could potentially damage it, so he can figure out where the money is, and then once he does, he's like, I gotta get this guy.
Yeah.
Who
you can tell what his priorities are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that they get to this dinner scene with Rachel and Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne. That scene is a parallel to Heat. It's got this orange tone to it of the colors, and there's a lot of orange interiors in Heat, and I'm sure that was an influence.
I did not pick up on that.
Yeah.
But you're also getting that's where Bruce is trying to do basically what Jim Gordon was doing a couple scenes ago. He was trying to figure out, is this a guy I can trust?
Yeah,
but of course,
filling each other out. Yeah.
With him, it's bigger, and this gets to something where this is probably the thing about the movie that bugs me the most, which is that Nolan. It's really the series. Nolan really plays up this idea that Bruce is not Batman.
Yeah. Bruce is really the mask. Like that,
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne, the way that he plays him is not the real him.
Yeah.
Batman is Bruce, basically.
That's the traditional thing. The thing is that here you have, it goes back to the first movie where he has that conversation with Rachel about how she, who has also figured out that he's Batman, although she never says as such.
Yeah.
But she says, well, you know, I can't do this as long as you're doing this. So he's trying to find a way out.
Yeah.
And when he's exploring, he's not just deciding whether or not he can trust Harvey Dent as an ally. He's trying to decide whether or not he can hand the reins to Harvey Dent.
Yeah. Take on his mantle, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe not physically as Batman, but as cleaning up the city.
Exactly. And I feel like that's not true to that character because he is, you know, Batman. And it's not about, you know, fixing this one problem. It's about, you know, making sure that nobody ever does that. And you can't really do that while casting off the mantle of Batman.
Yeah.
And it just kind of bugs me that I feel like Nolan and Goyer just don't get that about the character.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they do so many fascinating things in the movie, and the storyline is fresh, I think, because there's that element. But it just is not true to Batman.
Yeah, classic Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And there's an interesting oversight in this scene and earlier. They don't set up that Rachel knows that he's Batman.
Mm-hmm.
It's said much later on, about an hour in.
Yeah.
But that's a real rule that you have to have for sequels, is you can't just count on the people of having watched the first one to know what's happening in this one. You've got to re-dramatize it in this one. So that's just a small oversight that they didn't.
That is a good point. I mean, I just knew it, but you're right. It's not until later that you have, you know, it made clear that it's not that she figures out he's Batman. She just
already knew this whole time. So there needs to be a point early on where it's made clear that she does know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's another part, though. I feel that Rachel is the most underdeveloped character in this movie because she becomes, and it's something where I feel like it was not as underdeveloped as I thought when I first saw it, but I feel as though, and I didn't appreciate how there's a process that she's undergoing that is important to the movie, but that's really all she is. She's basically this love interest, part of this triangle that really is that nobody is really aware of except her, between her and Bruce and Harvey.
Right.
I feel like it diminishes her character, which, you know, Maggie Gyllenhaal, she's a good actress. You know, I don't know if Katie Holmes deserves as much hate as she got for her performance in the role, because she can be a good actress in her own right. I don't think that people could see past the fact that she was, I think that was back when she was Mrs. Tom Cruise. And so they assumed that she wasn't, you know, didn't have the chops for it. But Gyllenhaal does, but she feels underused in this role. So I guess her and Fincher kind of can vie for the prize of the most underused actor in the movie.
Yeah. We'll find it out later.
Yeah.
So the mob is basically the antagonist for Act 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not till we get to this TV scene where they're talking to Lau on the TV that Joker appears near the end of it. And here we have our real antagonist of the movie for Act 2.
Yeah. And you know, my gosh, the way that Heath Ledger just owns that scene.
Yeah, he just rips it up.
And he's got so many, and you look at the actors in that scene. You've got Eric Roberts, who, you know, I don't think he's, you know, really of that tier, but he's still a good actor in his own right. You've got Michael Jai White. You got, you know, and these are very good actors, and yet they are. It's just like Ledger comes in and he just owns that scene so effortlessly. It's like little wonder he wins the Oscar.
Yeah,
for that role, because he is just so darn good at it, and the way that he is, and these people, it kind of gets to the shift that is taking place in Gotham that the Joker represents. We're going from the Falcone, Maroni, you know, the mob's in it about making money, and to where it's about, you know, basically chaos.
right.
And it becomes a bit explicit with Alfred's speech later on, but it's like they can't realize that Joker is a class part. I mean, he literally differentiates himself with the makeup he wears.
Yeah, they don't understand him at all. They're like they just keep calling him, what is it, a freak.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you don't understand. Like he's gonna rise above all you guys if you don't.
And there's that scene later in the movie where the Joker has all the money and Lau and the Chechen shows up and he's like, "See, I told." He is like he was convinced that the Joker, it was all an act, and the Joker at the end was no different than them, and the Joker proves him wrong, badly wrong, at the cost of Chechen's life. But
Which leads perfectly into this. He says, if you're good at something, never do it for free.
Yes.
Which I'm like, that's not something that Joker believes at all. Like later on, he burns that stack of money and he shows you like what he's really about.
Yeah, there's an element of this that I think, which I loved about the movie, but I felt like it frustrated me that the characters were, deliberately dumbed down to where they didn't appreciate this, which is the fact that the Joker has these overarching plans. There's that later conversation that Joker has with Dent when Dent's transitioning to Two-Face, where Joker's like, "Do I look like a man with a plan?" I mean, and well, there is a plan, and that's kind of one of the things that makes the Joker who he is that he's got these very elaborate plans. Arguably, in this movie, they're a little over elaborate. Everything always seems to fall into place for him.
Yeah,
it's like. And there's no sense of that the Joker can really improvise. It's all based on plans. But yeah, they just don't see that it's not about a plan to make money. It's not about a plan to become a power broker.
he just wants chaos.
Yeah, he wants to see the world burn.
Yeah,
And he's very good at. And of course, it's not something he's going to do himself. No, he's going to show how deep down that's what everyone is. So,
and this is a small note at this point, but the new suit that Batman gets, they make it's not impervious to dogs or knives, or dogs, knives, or gunshots. And it's like, if this were a fan designing this thing, they'd make it impervious. But that's a storytelling thing of it has weaknesses, and so it doesn't. It makes it hard for the main character. So.
And that works as well it's a good metaphor for the Batman in this. Again, this gets to where it's good for the movie, but it's not true to the character, which is that, Batman has weaknesses. The weakness, as Nolan's and Goyer have written him, is that he's kind of looking to a point where he doesn't have to be Batman anymore.
Yeah.
And that, of course, comes up a little bit later, where, very shortly, when you have the fundraiser, where he, and Rachel recognizes it, well, actually, she doesn't recognize it at first, but where he's like, I believe in Harvey Dent, I trust Harvey Dent. He's symbolically kind of saying, I'm ready to, hand the reins over to you, give you the mantle, and so I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But that's a weakness. And in some ways, he doesn't become a more effective Batman in the movie until that weakness has been addressed.
Then we have that scene where I don't know characters' names, but the black guy that was at the meeting, the big gangster guy, boss.
I can't remember, but that was Michael Jai White's character.
Yeah, they take the Joker's dead body to him, and he gets up and he's got the knife to him, and we get the first telling of how I got these scars.
Yes,
and
Gamble is
Gamble. Yeah, that's right.
And what's interesting, I read that David Goyer, who's one of the co-writers, apparently he hates origin stories.
Yeah,
and so and I could appreciate the joke in that respect, which is the fact that he's just going to have the Joker constantly dispensing origin stories.
Yeah, different ones,
different origin stories.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. We're kind of jumping ahead for this, but the one that he gives to Rachel is about his wife, and he's like, oh, like he's tailoring these to his target.
Yes, and of course, Ledger sells every single one of them.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, I just cannot. You have to wonder if this film could have succeeded with an actor like, say, who played Ra's al Ghul. Name escapes me for the moment.
Oh, Liam Neeson,
who is a good actor, but just you couldn't do the transformation that Ledger does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could someone who just couldn't quite command the role the way that Ledger does, would have quite the same affection in people that it does
I don't
today?
think so. He kind of stole the show with that. I'm going to get to that later, but
I mean, it's a showy performance, but it's a performance that has every right to be showy. And
Yeah.
Ledger also knows how to tone it down. I'm thinking of the scene where later, and again we're getting ahead of ourselves, where he's arrested and he's in in the holding, and the mayor shows up and he's like, "Oh, here's our new commissioner, Jim Gordon." Everyone's applauding, and he doesn't say a single word in the entire scene. He plays the role. He could have sat there and
Does applaud at the end,
yeah,
which is
he does,
great.
He does the applaud, but he doesn't do the bombast, which you might imagine his character might do, given how bombastic he is throughout the movie.
Yeah. The counter to this, I think, would be Suicide Squad guy.
Jared Leto.
Jared
Oh,
Leto
gosh.
did it in there. He really just. Well, I've heard stories of his out of control
Method.
method acting for
Yes.
that. Of he's sending rats and used condoms to people, and it's like, are you kidding me? That's just
How he keeps
it's
getting,
unprofessional. If not, I don't know.
how he
other
keeps getting
things.
jobs. I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, he's got an Oscar. Maybe he even deserved the Oscar. I must confess, I've not seen the Dallas Buyers Club, but it's just that a decade in, and he just has a stature that his. I mean, he's a great supporting role. I liked him in Fight Club. I've seen him in other things too where I've enjoyed him, but he just does not seem to. He just seems to get a little carried away with himself when you get in the center stage.
Yeah, but back to that gamble scene, when he actually gives him the scars, it's off screen, and they just have that violin when it happens, and I love that, just the off screenness of it. It makes it more effective, and I don't know. I like PG-13 rating as a razor to cut off the stuff that. Sorry, that's a bad metaphor for this. To just cut off the fat layer that you don't need to tell the story.
Yeah,
and I don't know. That's kind of what I like. But
for me, the best part of that scene though wasn't what he does to Gamble. It's what he does afterward, where he has the two surviving bodyguards, and it's a job audition.
Yeah, same thing. He breaks the poles and he throws it to him, and you know what's going to happen, so you cut away.
Yeah,
it's like. Yeah, you know what's going down.
It gets it's in a microcosm what Joker's really about, which is about manipulating people to do horrible things. It's like Joker does horrible things. He's not one of those people that pretends like, I didn't do anything, although he claims that later on. But the reality is that he is about trying to bring everyone down to his level.
Right.
And he's convinced of that. And there's so much that could have been done with that they don't do. Maybe for the best, but it does get to how Joker is about corrupting everyone in a way that not even the mob can. I mean, the mob can corrupt as they did in the first movie. They can corrupt the cops. They can corrupt the officials by payoffs and cause them to look the other way.
That's kind of secondary to their business type thing.
Those-
Joker's not about that. He's just about the corrupting people.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the means to an end. It's the end itself. It's the corruption. So, but then you have that great scene where we've already then you get to the scene where Bruce decides he's going to extract Lao from China.
Oh yeah, that's such a great scene, that Hong Kong sequence.
Oh yeah,
I've seen this movie dozens of times, but when I watched it this time, that was just a breath of fresh air, and it's like, ooh, yeah, I like that.
It shows how Nolan he is perfectly happy with working on this very grand stage. It's not just going to be a Gotham story.
Yeah,
we're going to have we're going to have this is happening on a much larger scale. And you see it throughout all three movies. In the first movie, Bruce goes to Asia to learn how to do what he does, and in the third movie, it starts in I think it was Africa of all places. And then of course and then Bruce later gets dumped there as well, and it's just it's happening on it in a way that again doesn't necessarily entirely feel true to the character, but it works. So that's the flip side of it. Is that while I don't always like the choices that Nolan makes, he somehow makes them all work.
Yeah. So I'm going to revisit the heists thing at this point.
Go ahead.
This one, I was thinking about it, and it does kind of take the cool camp of don't tell them much, but it does give you enough for you to figure it out as the heist is going on, because he talks to Lucius beforehand about the skyhook thing. So you know he's going to use that for something.
No. Lucius tells him about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So, and that's where you get Lucius's role as tech support.
Right.
Is that and it gets to how it's a more believable aspect of it, which is that in the comics, Batman does so much of this himself, and if he doesn't do it, he knows what he wants and how to go about it. And whereas here, he's Bruce relies upon Alfred feeding him information, Lucius giving him the tools. And he's kind of like, this is what I want to do. And Lucius is like, well, we've got, this tumbler and we've got this climbing gear.
Gives him his tool or his toys.
Yeah. So, and Lucius is the one who's kind of like, well, we could try the skyhook thing that the CIA developed. And of course, it's not like a robot controlled plane that flies in. He has to hire somebody with a C-130 to scoop him out.
Yeah. And so they don't show you the whole plan at the beginning, but this is kind of a middle zone. You can show them the whole plan, and then you've got suspense for the whole thing, or you can not tell them anything, and then when you see them do the cool things, you're like, oh, that's so cool. Yeah. It's kind of in the middle, siding towards the cool part, but you've already know the stuff about the skyhook. So when that thing goes up in the air, if you're paying enough attention, you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen, and then it happens. And it makes it feel cooler because you've figured it out.
But how he gets to that point is an open question.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you also, of course, have there's an efficiency there because Nolan also introduces the sonic device.
Right.
Which becomes a plot point later on.
Yeah.
But it's on a small scale, and Lucius is like, oh, that's cool. And later on, it's like, oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah. And there's the line where Bruce asks about that afterwards, or maybe before. I guess it must have been before, but he's like, sonar, like a submarine. And it's like, I didn't pick up before, like, oh, he was going to say a bat.
Yeah.
And that is spot on.
It kind of gets to how Lucius, there's always kind of like this knowing thing where I know you're Batman, I know you're Batman, but we're never going to say it.
Right.
And I think that's a callback to the first movie where Lucius says, if you don't tell me, then I don't have to deny it.
Right.
Yeah. So I deny it more honestly. So, but then of course you have,
my mom laughed when he was dragging Lau across the floor. That's funny.
Yeah. That's another actor who I can't remember the guy's name, but he's in so many things. He kind of is, he's part of. There are always these actors who play the stock roles, and this is kind of an issue with Hollywood. The Hispanic actors playing certain Hispanic roles, and so forth. And he's in all these roles. Like it seems like whenever they need an Asian guy of a certain age for a TV show or movie, he gets cast. I mean, he's so good in what he does, and he plays his role nicely. But it's so easy to get overshadowed with these kind of showier performances in the movie. And I know I was critical of the fact that I feel like there are too many plot threads in Dark Knight. We'll be getting some of them. This one works because Lau is key to why the mob turns to the Joker.
Yeah. Because
Lau this is what was happening earlier in the film, which is that Batman and Gordon were throttling the money laundering. Lau and his operation was the only means that the mob had left to get their money laundered. And when Lau's gone, it forces the mob to say, okay, let's just go ahead and go with Joker.
Yeah.
And so they empower Joker. And of course, this allows Joker then to subsequently corrupt the mob. But this is where you get the setup of what happens with his plan to kill three key figures.
Right.
The judge, the commissioner, and the district attorney.
Yeah, so we've got kind of a shell game at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up killing all of them, or attempting to kill all of them.
Yeah. And that's but you get that fundraiser scene, which is really, I think, such a key scene in the sense that it conveys. You get Bruce saying, this to me is where Bruce says, I'm ready to give up the life.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have Dent proposing to Rachel. And it kind of makes Rachel an object between the two of them, and she's very aware of this. And again, I think Gyllenhaal is almost criminally underused in this.
Yeah.
She really doesn't know which one. She still, likes Bruce. She's attracted to Dent, and I think this comes out a little bit later. she is the very thing that attracts her to them is the thing that she can't accept in Bruce because of how he does it, which is the crusaderism.
Yeah.
The sense of them as crime fighters. And so, but she can't quite commit to Dent because she's attracted to Bruce just yet. But at the same time, she's not telling him, no, let's keep it professional. But then, of course, Joker shows up and ruins everybody's day.
And then I've already mentioned this, but you get the second, you want to know how I got these scars moment.
Yeah.
And he tells about his wife, and
yeah, you get the Joker leering at Rachel, and
yeah, he's like, you got a little fight in you.
Yeah.
I like that. And then Batman comes in, he's like, then you're going to love me. Yeah. I don't know. This is kind of that Psycho thing of everything's been said about this movie. So
yeah. But again, just still though the fact that Bruce's Batman is trying to walk away, I just this is where I think it becomes most apparent. And I just get so hung up on it.
yeah,
Although arguably it kind of makes the ending of the film a bit more meaningful.
yeah,
Then you have, but you get, and you I'm going to kind of skip over the scene for where Alfred has a conversation with Bruce about Joker's motives to get to what happens next, which is where you have the consultant, Reese. This is the one that just so bugged me.
mm-hmm.
He's in the beginning of the film. He's brought in to help with going through Lau's books
right,
for Wayne Enterprises. And he figures out that Wayne Enterprises is bankrolling Batman, or is kind of supporting Batman, which therefore means that Bruce is Batman. He figures all this out, and it's the kind of thing that, frankly, you wonder that doesn't happen. Why does it happen more often in the storyline? Yeah. But it's just kind of like, why do we have this? Why do we need this?
yeah.
It just seems
It is kind of tangential. You could cut that out.
It's fat that just.
Although it does play into his storyline later of he's kind of the driver for that last part where the Joker gets somebody to kill him, or try to kill him.
But again, actually there's something else that happens later on that I didn't realize until I watched it this time that I'll get to. But it just doesn't seem. I mean, it's there, it's useful, but it's not necessary in a way that I cannot find anything in Heat that you could take out and still have the film as it is. I felt like you could have, with just minor modifications, taken the Reese subplot, abandoned it, and had a bit of a leaner film, and you wouldn't have missed a thing.
Right.
So, but then you have the whole the fact that you now have the setup for the commissioner's funeral, and
the mayor is the target.
Yeah, the mayor's the next target, and you have and it's such a neat plot too. Because as soon as the plot goes off, all of Joker's men can just blend in with the crowd because they're all wearing the uniforms and everything. Mm-hmm. And of course you have oh my gosh, Gordon's dead. And you have that point where when Dent is interrogating Joker's man, and the guy who plays him, I cannot remember the guy's name. It's David. I can't remember Dekmarian. I can't pronounce his name, but he. Oh,
the guy, the crazy guy.
Yeah, another example.
Yeah, I don't know his name, but I like him as an actor.
Oh yeah, another example of an amazing actor in my. And of course, he does such a great job with it. But you have the point at which Dent is so wound up, he is about to cross a line, and Batman stops him, and it's like he's not just preserving Dent; he's preserving his exit strategy to get out of being Batman.
Yeah.
But then you have the scene where they're kind of trapped, and Joker's trying to force Batman to out himself, and I feel like this is when Rachel makes her decision. Because remember how it is that they feel like that the Joker's given them no other choice but to, reveal who Batman is, and Dent has that speech, and the people are kind of like, oh, Batman sucks and everything, and it's just, it just kind of feels like a little too stagey for me. But then Dent declares he's Batman. And I feel like that's when Rachel makes her choice because she's so disappointed that Bruce doesn't step up and do it. And that's when she kind of feels like Dent is the more heroic figure.
Right.
And that
part felt like Tale of Two Cities to me, and that was a direct inspiration for the sequel, The Dark Knight Rises. So I was wondering if maybe they were thinking about it at this point too.
I hadn't picked up on that.
So-
It's an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't read Tale of Two Cities, and I haven't either, but I know it through I watched it on Wishbone. The guy gives himself up on execution for the main character, and anyway, he becomes kind of the hero of the story.
Well, and that is the thing, is that at that moment, Dent really is more of a hero, and part of it's the fact that, again, it's another example of how out of character Batman is the fact that he is willing to out himself like that. I mean, you read the comics, Batman always thinks through his problems. He always finds a solution that is true to him, and this it almost feels like the Joker's broken Batman at this point. He's backed Batman into a corner.
Well, I thought it was a really interesting thing to like take his identity as Batman and have that as the conflict of like he's, I don't know, it's kind of the Joker getting underneath the suit and like peeling it off type thing of like, I don't know. I'm not I don't know much about classic Batman and stuff, but just I thought that was an interesting conflict.
And of course, the contrast is with later in the film. This goes back to Reese, where the Joker then flips and decides that he wants Batman to remain a secret, and that's when he tells Gotham, "Oh, go kill this guy."
Yeah,
and it very nearly happens. It's just that Bruce is willing to do that. It's just it just doesn't seem entirely true. Again, works for the story, great for the movie, just doesn't feel like the way people would expect of Batman.
and there's the scene with Alfred right before he gives himself up that he's like, Batman can make the choice, no one else can make the right choice, and like he can be the outcast. I never caught that before. That's a direct setup for what happens at the end. So.
And it gets to, and it goes, and of course, it's also a callback to the first movie, which is the idea of being Batman makes him a symbol, and that he's uncorruptible. You can corrupt a person, you can't corrupt a symbol. Dent, and this doesn't get played perhaps as much as it might have been, but Dent is basically proving Bruce wrong in that respect, which may be why Bruce is kind of like, okay, here you can be. Maybe I should hand the mantle over to you, but the fact that Bruce is willing to basically destroy Batman, which is really the moment he reveals he's Batman, Batman's gone.
Yeah,
It's always going to be Bruce as Batman, and he's
true.
and it's in the variations of which I'm familiar, which kind of play out the Batman story. He will sometimes give up being Batman, but he will never publicly, declare he's Batman. In some stories, like the Injustice storyline, where they made the cut for the video game, he's exposed as Batman by Superman. Getting way off track here, or in Batman Beyond, when he nearly dies as Batman because he has a heart attack, he just simply gives the mantle, but he never publicly declares it.
Right.
And this is the only time I can think of where you actually have him, as a character taking that step.
right.
And it just seems so
Not Batman.
Yeah, so not Batman.
Okay, so then we get to the convoy scene. It's so good. Okay. I'll get to that in Criss Cross. Okay. But the cinematography here, that just so that you've got a lead to be interested later. Yeah. There's some similarities to Heat, but that convoy scene, it hit me this time of just how courageous, Harvey was being for going into that, because he's like risking his life so that they have this one chance to catch Joker.
Yeah, and of course, Batman's trying to do the same thing, especially, and I think that's encapsulated in the scene where the Joker has the RPG and he's firing it at the transport, and then the Tumbler just flies in and literally takes the shot for them.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. Like at that point, I was like, wouldn't Joker realize that that's the real Batman and he'd go after him? But maybe he is after Harvey. I don't know. But,
or maybe it's just, chaos for the sake of chaos.
Yeah, could be.
So I think Joker, it's a good question. Did Joker ever buy that Harvey was Batman, and I can't recall.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he says he almost bought it when in the investigation scene, which means he didn't.
Yeah. So he knew he was just really kind of just again causing chaos.
Yeah.
So, but then of course you had it all leads to that great climax where you realize, ta-da, that Gordon isn't dead after all.
Yeah.
So,
Before that, when the the Batpod or the Batmobile crashes, that moment where the Batpod comes out is still just so cool.
yeah.
But,
I mean, I had this question of, okay, so was the Tumbler always designed to do that, or did Bruce have that retrofitted, or what
Yeah, I don't
exactly?
know.
So, but that Batpod is pretty awesome.
yeah, and then the kids shooting the cars with like
Oh yeah,
finger guns.
and then all of a sudden the explosions as he's
Yeah.
blasting his way through to get to save Dent.
Yeah.
But again, I just that gets to how it seems like everything always seems to work to Joker's plan. That he always has his men exactly where they need to be to like when they come out from underneath the. I mean, I get the whole herding the transports into that one area by setting the bus on fire,
Mhm.
and they get in there, and the fact they turn out at that one place where they can intercept the helicopter by shooting the cables
Yeah.
to cause the helicopter to crash. It's like, I mean, it's just how did he know that was the choice they were going to make in terms of turning? It's just like
Right.
people were all too often following Joker's plans exactly as he needed them to until it was convenient for the story for them not to.
Yeah.
That's where I had a problem. Of course, this plays into what happens later when Gordon says, "Oh, Joker wanted to be caught all along." Really?
Well, I mean, he did. Like, that was that part. Well, I'll get to that part in a minute. But anyway, I liked Joker's line of, "Excuse me, I want to drive," and he
Yeah.
pushes the guy out. It's those smaller moments with Joker where he's just duping about. That's
Oh yeah,
what I enjoy.
Heath Ledger just killing it. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just so good in this role. But then you have, of course, the Joker's in police custody, and Gordon is now basically the man of the hour, and somehow Joker gets Dent and Rachel. And of course, we figure out how later. It's part of the second part of the movie, but still, it's kind of like again all these plans. And I get why he's doing it, because he's got the mob working for him.
Mhm.
And it's part of his whole corrupting of the mob thing. But it's when he then has the cop, and another great character actor is in that role, and he somehow antagonizes the cop to giving him exactly what he wants.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, am I getting ahead? I'm
Let
sorry,
me jump
getting
back
far
real
ahead.
quick. Okay, so that moment where the truck is just flipped and Joker's coming out and Batman's coming up on the Batpod is just so great. Like that's how you dramatize an idea for a movie. If it's an unstoppable force coming up against an immovable object,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize that's actually a line that's said later in the movie. But yeah,
And the Joker very nearly wins.
yeah,
That's one of the things I liked about that scene was that, the Batman.
yeah, he almost makes him do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but it's Gordon who steps in, and saves Batman from being shot.
It's just a perfect way to dramatize your conflict in just this one moment. I mean, they've got the interrogation scene later, but this one is just like one little moment that just gets the whole conflict of the entire movie and boils it down into this one action, and it's really cool.
And how Batman could have killed the Joker, but he chooses not to. He's
Yeah,
like-
he chooses. Yeah, he
swerves
chooses
away.
not to break his one rule.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I sometimes feel that the movies have not really gotten very well, and arguably sometimes it's difficult in comics too, which is the degree to which the Batman is accepted by the police. I mean, the Gordon thing works, but he somehow is taking over the interrogation of the Joker. The good cop, bad Batman.
Yeah.
I guess is what you could call it.
Good cock Batman is
Yeah.
what me and my brother call it.
And how Joker uses it to say, I've got I've since this I've managed to capture both Dent and Rachel, and I'm holding these places, and now he's going to have everyone dancing to his tune, and so that caused all the Batman and the cops they're going to go save Harvey Dent and Rachel, and then there's this cop standing guard over him. And for Joker's plan to work, he has got to, push his cops' buttons, and he does so. But it's just, again, it's too convenient the way he does it. That it's too convenient for the plot for him to get away. It would have made it more interesting as for that not to work and there be a plan B or plan C. It's just this idea that this is that's kind of how I initially that's how I want to view the whole scene of him being in jail, is that because you see the scene where the guy gets thrown into holding, complaining about his gut, because he has the bomb in it, and I'm thinking that would have been a great this is Joker improvising, but no, it turns out this is all part of his plan because he has to because the real purpose of all this was to get Lau. Again, it's too intricate.
Right.
The more intricate the plan, the more likely it is to fail, and yet Joker's plans never seem to fail.
Yeah.
Until, again, it's convenient for the plot that they do. So, at the very end. But it's just...
Well, let's get into the interrogation scene.
Yeah, let's get into the interrogation scene. You have more notes on it than I do.
There's... oh, this is so fun. Well, first off, before we actually get into the interrogation, Gordon is outside looking at the knives on the table, and he's like, there's nothing in his pockets, knives and lint, like no identification, no anything.
Yeah.
That's just so creepy, that no identity thing that they do with the Joker, and it goes along with his backstories of how I got these scars, and it changes every time. It would just mess up his character, I think, if you gave him a backstory.
He doesn't need it, and that's where I think Nolan succeeds in a way that Burton fails, because as great as the 89 Batman was, you didn't need to know Joker's backstory.
No, yeah.
It's enough for him to be there. So
the interrogation scene, this is kind of a meeting of the minds type thing. It was really fun to watch this with my mom because she forgets what happens in movies, so she'd forgotten about the turning on the lights and Batman's behind him and smacks the head on the table.
Oh, that is so well done.
Yeah,
because Gordon walks out and you don't know what's going to happen next, but he's already in the room.
Yeah. And then they're okay. I was going to save this for Criss Cross, but this is the biggest parallel between Heat and The Dark Knight. This scene is the diner scene, basically, and this is where you get their two motivations, and they come up against each other, and if you were to boil the movie down into one scene, both of these movies, you could do that for these two scenes. And you really get the sense of who Joker is and what he's about, and Batman and his one rule. And he tries to get him to break his one rule by the end of it with Rachel and Harvey. And
the Joker finds a way to punch Batman's buttons. He figures out that Batman is attracted to Rachel.
Right.
And maybe that's the point at which he decides he doesn't need to know Batman's identity more, because he knows what he needs to know about Batman to really get to him.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how because he needs the police to clear out, he goes ahead and, quote, breaks and tells them where they are. But then he does it in a way to where even though the Batman succeeds, the Joker sets him up to fail.
Right.
Because when they're rushing out, Gordon's like, who are you going to go save? And Batman says, Rachel. And, of course, where Joker told him Rachel's going to be, that's where Dent is. Oh, yeah. And of course, how that sets up.
I always thought of it as he was telling him he's going to go save Rachel, but then he was actually going to go save Harvey. But, yeah, I think you're right.
And then what he does by that is then that Harvey, and you have that with Harvey screaming, why aren't you saving Rachel? So Harvey now turns against the Batman. And, of course, maybe Joker also knew which one was going to be saved. He knew that Batman was probably going to save whoever he went after, so he's deliberately set him up for that. Yeah. And then, of course, he does save Dent, but Dent's still, of course, horribly scarred, and Rachel's not, but she's already made her choice. And you have that, where she says, I say yes. Yeah. She has chosen Dent. Dent is more heroic than Batman. And to think about what it might have said, where she probably was fine with Bruce saving Dent, even though she knew it would lead to her death.
Yeah.
In fact, that's probably the choice she would have wanted to have made, wanted Bruce to make. But still, this idea of dying knowing that, or believing that Bruce was prioritizing Dent over her.
Yeah.
Wow. That's I think where I find the Joker's cruelty best developed, not in terms of
and I like that him going after Rachel has the double thing of Dent thinking that he chose him, and so now he's after him, and that's turning of Dent. Yeah, that's great.
But of course, it's not just Batman that Harvey blames, because when he's in the hospital and Gordon interviews him, he blames Gordon because this is called back to.
Well, before we get to that,
sorry.
Okay, so that Joker wanting to get caught thing has been copied by, well, at least movies of that era, a whole bunch of movies. So there's Avengers, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Skyfall, which Skyfall is directly influenced by The Dark Knight. So we might do that later as a episode.
Huh.
So.
I must confess, I've seen all three movies. I did not make that connection. I remember all the scenes you're talking about, and of course, it's such a prominent part of Avengers, which is one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
But it's just,
all the villains of that era wanted to get caught, and then they.
It was a common thing. I guess that it's a good thing Heat was made earlier, because then I guess at some point Michaell would have wanted to have been caught.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
which would have made no sense at
of course.
But yeah.
So it gets to somehow. It doesn't seem to make sense. Again, it goes back to how I would have much preferred that Joker got out of this through improvisation, rather than having, again, some sort of plan so intricate that the world's greatest detective was being played.
Yeah.
I could see at some point, but really throughout the film, Batman is constantly dancing to the Joker's tune.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of have to go with the cops as part of what it is, but the fact that supposedly this incredibly gifted detective, and that's the element of the Batman character that Nolan really downplays. He gives so much of the work to Lucius and Alfred to do a lot of the detective work, and he just kind of has Batman as kind of a man of action,
right?
And it's like Batman should be kind of seeing where Joker's going and anticipating that, rather than just reacting and then just getting there.
Should be more of a Jason Bourne than he is. Like he's always ahead than I don't know.
Or because that if I've read, I can't claim to be a huge Batman fan. I've read all the Joker comics, but some of the best ones are where it's kind of like Batman's thinking a little bit ahead. Joker has to anticipate that, and there's a reaction that takes place.
So this goes into a great end of our second act of the big down point of Rachel's dead and Harvey is maimed, and he's also heartbroken, and we're not clear on where he is at this point.
And maybe it was a reflection of the influence of the last films we did in Criss Cross. But I feel like Nolan missed a real opportunity here, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But you have that, you pick up that third act with Gordon, interviewing Dent. You see Dent for the first time, that incredibly damaged face, and he blames Gordon because, again, a call back to the earlier scene where he didn't trust Gordon's cops. Gordon was working with what he could, but he blames the fact that Gordon's trust of corrupt cops is what created this situation. So Dent has rejected Batman, he has rejected Gordon, he has rejected the system, and they make this point explicitly in the movie. Joker's won.
Yeah,
he has taken the symbol that Batman was prepared to hand the reins over to, and he has caused that person to give up on the system.
Yeah.
Then you have Joker with his latest, grand scheme, which is he's going to, he threatens to blow up the hospitals unless Reese is killed, and you have that confrontation between Joker and Harvey Dent, and this is the Joker's "I'm just an agent of chaos" nonsense, which is just so implausible given how so much organization is necessary to make all this work. He has to literally take over an organization to make all this work in the sense of the mob. And I felt at this point, when Joker gives Harvey Dent the gun. He basically gives Harvey Dent an opportunity to kill him.
Yeah.
This is where you see the first coin flip. It would have been so much, in some ways, it would have been so much of a more interesting film if Dent had killed the Joker and it had just been Dent's film.
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah.
Because it's like, what does Joker really do at this point that isn't already done?
Yeah.
And whereas I feel like it becomes a little busy because now we have these two threads we're following. There's Dent doing his thing, Joker doing his thing, and Batman's bouncing back between one and the other,
Yeah.
you know, and trying to stay on top of it all. I just felt like that it would have been, not to mention, it would have been that great transition, going back to the last podcast,
Mm-hmm.
to where all of a sudden, and Aaron Eckhart, good actor,
like a character handoff.
character
Yeah.
handoff,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, probably would outrage people.
I don't think I've ever seen that before, like a villain character handoff.
It would
That
have.
would be interesting.
It would be. I mean, it's like, how can you possibly throw away Heath Ledger? Or you would have missed the whole, you know, dynamiting the hotel scene, which everyone marvels over, or dynamiting the hospital scene.
Yeah.
But it just would. It just. I feel like it was a real opportunity missed because nobody would have seen that coming,
Yeah.
and it really would have been about because Joker's plan was done at that point.
Yeah.
Everything afterward is kind of like Joker being proven wrong. And it would be so much more interesting to see that, you know, done from the perspective of Harvey Dent waging war on the system that he tried to defend.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, you know, maybe that was an executive decision. Oh, no, we got to bring back Joker for the sequel. Not knowing what, unfortunately, what happened to Heath Ledger afterward. But
And then there's kind of the fallout scene for Batman where he's sitting in his penthouse apartment with the bat suit half off,
Mhm.
and Alfred's there bringing him his meal, and you've got that blue outside the windows. Visually, I think that's the biggest influence from Heat, because you have the Macaulay's apartment. You've got the ocean outside, and it's like that blue outside the windows. I think that's an intentional thing.
yeah, and it's a scene that I think unfortunately gets overshadowed, but it is one where, you know, Batman, I mean, Bruce feels like he's lost.
Yeah,
He's lost Rachel. He's lost Dent.
yeah,
He's everything he has been hoping for. And he doesn't realize the extent of his loss because he hasn't read the
yeah. And Alfred takes the letter away, and he's like, "What's that?" And he's like,
He recognizes this is not the time.
"Yeah,
These wounds do not
yeah,
need
it's
salt
not the
on
time."
them.
Yeah.
So, but of course we have the Joker sparking panic, so he can have another of his social experiments, and this is where you get the fairy scene,
Mm-hmm.
and which, you know, I kind of like because it goes back to the theme of, you know, how people are stepping up and doing the right thing,
Right.
and we're going to go ahead and have you know, even though you have a ship full of convicts and, you know, a ship full of ordinary passengers, how the ordinary passengers get closer to, you know, setting off the bombs than the convicts do is, you know, and then you get, but of course this is totally separate from this other thing that Joker has going on. This is where the fight, it's just getting so busy, and of course Dent's running around, you know, knocking off cops and knocking off, you know, the mob that the remaining surviving members of the mob that the Joker hasn't already killed. And it's just like, it's just, this is where the film just kind of gets so messy because you also have the Reese subplot. It's just, it's just getting a little carried away. I feel like it needed to be more efficient, and that's my proposal: is kill the Joker.
Yeah,
and
kill the
comes
Joker,
like-
make it
comes out
streamlined.
later. Yeah,
Yeah, that boat scene, I really love that. Of just the, and they dramatize it perfectly. Of they bring it down to the last moment, and it's like, you see the clock ticking to 12, and the guy just about to turn the key on the. It's right after the prisoner has thrown the thing out the window, and you're expecting him to turn the key, but then the guy on the normal citizen's boat is about ready to turn the key, and Joker's like, "And here we go," and he goes back to the guy with the key, and he doesn't turn it, and he puts it back in the box, and it goes to 12, and it's just like Joker's proved wrong at that point. That's the kind of message that I want to strive for with Transcend Entertainment stuff.
And admittedly, that's what you would lose if you take Joker out of the story at that point. And it is a great scene. I think for me, it's the fact that when you have that final fight scene between, that final where Joker has the hostages from the hospital.
Yeah.
And he has that nice setup. But that to me, that is the weakest part of the movie because it's
I'd agree. It's
such a video game.
I very much zoned out during that point.
It's such
during this watching.
It's such a video gamey fight scene.
Yeah, it is.
Because
you could condense that to just
Yeah.
the fight between them, and it would be the same thing.
Yeah, it's so busy. It's kind of hectic and all over the place, and it's just not necessary at that point.
Yeah.
Especially when we haven't even wrapped up the Two-Face storyline. Now that that Dent's going to get his revenge. He's taking out all these other people, and the only person he has left now that he can hurt is Gordon. So he gets Gordon's family, and he's going to do for Gordon what he feels Gordon has done for him because he trusted Gordon, and Gordon failed him. So, and then of course you have the what happens there, and then you have that final thing where I'll leave it to you.
It still really touches me. This end thing, I know the situation is kind of contrived, but just the way it plays out and that end speech and the...
Batman takes the fall being what Gotham needs him to be.
Yeah.
I wrote down that quote because I think it encapsulates that final decision so nicely. And it is a good decision. But it's also in some ways that it's another example of Joker's victory because... And this gets to where, again... As much as I dislike it, it works for the story. Bruce is trapped in being Batman. Not only that, but Batman as a symbol is now somewhat corrupted because now he takes the fall for a lot of things, and they have to hunt him down now. And so Joker kind of wins, even though he doesn't have that all-consuming victory that he's denied because of the conspiracy of silence between Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne, or Jim Gordon and Batman.
Yeah. So Gordon ends the end of The Dark Knight with the speech, and I know you guys have seen it a ton of times, and I'm not going to do it any justice compared to Gary Oldman, but here we go. Because he's the hero Gotham deserves, but not the one it needs right now. So we'll hunt him because he can take it. Because he's not our hero. He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight. Get to
and it's it's the idea that being Batman is a burden. No, it's a cross that Bruce Wayne needs to bear, and he can never be the Batman he wants to be because he needs to be the Batman that Gotham needs.
Yeah,
it's I like that ending.
Yeah, I really like it too. I love those kind of endings that leave you on just feeling good and like that. And it's like a bittersweet ending when you think about it, but that just the good guys staying the good guys to the very end, not compromising their principles. That's the kind of endings that I like, that we want to strive for with Transcend Entertainment. So anyway, off my soapbox. Yeah. So that was our review of The Dark Knight. Every once in a while, two films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go Criss Cross.
Criss Cross.
Okay, so...
Well, I'll be honest. When I was watching these, I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, where are we going to be crisscrossing? And I'm thinking the criminal misuse of William Fichtner. That's about what I was able to come up with.
Well, that's ironic because the first parallel that I noticed was William Fichtner.
Yeah. But I can kind of see some parallels, but I'll be honest, the similarities are what stand out more. So I'm going to look forward to hearing what you derive from it.
The main similarities between this, and I didn't know them going in, I think it's mainly style. Genre is another one, and also another one I'll get to in a minute. So the biggest influence on this one is the genre. Nolan very much went a crime drama / crime thriller. With Heat, it's basically exactly the same thing.
And that's something where I think that comparison stands out more if you think about the superhero movies that preceded it. You have, don't have to go too far back. We could just talk about the Superman movies, the Batman movies that Burton started, the X-Men movies, the Spider-Man movies. They're all superhero movies. They're all movies about these exceptional people, oftentimes with exceptional abilities, who are doing exceptional things, and they happen to be fighting crime or evil or saving the world or what have you. And this movie, it's more just Batman is fighting crime.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think it's one of the things that makes The Dark Knight so distinctive from other superhero movies. And when I noticed that, it made me realize just how similar it was to Heat in so many ways.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is to do with Gotham as a character in these movies. In the comics, Gotham is kind of just treated as like, oh, well, there's crime just like there is any city. I mean, like, there's always going to be crime type thing. But in the Dark Knight trilogy, you really see a progression of how they actually fight off crime in Gotham, and it gets better. But you get into Dark Knight Rises and you see there's corruption under the surface, but they actually do stuff.
I think it gets to what you can do in the movies you can't do in the comics, because if you solve crime in Gotham, you suddenly
got
don't
no
have
more
to read.
comics.
Exactly. Whereas you're not planning on making 50 Dark Knight movies, so you can have a storyline that is distinct.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I can add a story point to. In movies, different from TV shows and comic book series, the main character dies at the end. And I mean that metaphorically. Like, you can't see this character going any further than they do at the end of this movie. So The Dark Knight very much plays by that, even though it's got a sequel. He gets to a point where he basically has to stop being Batman to be Batman.
Yeah, it's like Batman Begins. It's the termination point where it's like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon.
Yeah.
It's like you're seeing him, gestating and forming, and then he emerges from it. And he's no longer Bruce Wayne striving to fight crime. He is the Batman. And this one, at some point, he becomes the Batman that he was trying to be. Ends up dying at the end of the movie, even though he lives. So.
And so the opening heist is probably the most direct comparison you can make. They've got the masks and doing a heist at the beginning of the movie. And actually, the visual storytelling of it is pretty similar. They've got like this floaty camera thing they do with Heat. When Gwengrow is deciding to kill these guards, you have like this floaty camera around him, and you actually have this rising violin thing that's very similar to the Joker's rising violin. So that was a direct similarity that I saw, but that's about as close.
Well, don't forget the other aspect of that's similar, which is in both of them, they're stealing money from William Fichtner's character.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that might be that could be exactly why he cast William Fichtner in that part.
That is a good point. I guess if you're going to squander William Fichtner in a small role, it is best to do it as a subtle call out to your influence.
Yeah, and then the semi truck used in a heist against the bank truck, exactly the same as the convoy scene in the middle of The Dark Knight. Okay, there's a lot of really small things that I'm just going to go through. There's the parking garage, which I already discussed. That could be similar to the parking garage scene at the same place in The Dark Knight, just right after the opening heist. Again, as I mentioned, the blue light out of De Niro's window, which is similar to the blue light outside of the penthouse when Batman has just lost Rachel. And then we get to the other biggest parallel, which is the rivalry between these two guys, which really becomes more of a relationship between them. It stays a rivalry in The Dark Knight, but where we see this most is in the diner scene. When they meet, we really get this meeting of the minds / butting heads thing of their relationship. And then in The Dark Knight, we get the same thing. The only difference is Batman isn't willing to cede any ground to the Joker.
He's constantly playing up their differences. Joker's pointing out the parallels, and Batman's constantly projecting them.
Right. Whereas in the diner scene, it's almost like...
Well, I was thinking about how when they're saying they're talking to each other and talking about how we're talking like this and we can be friendly, but they're always like, if it happens, like, if you do what you're going to do, then I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It is implying that they can, for a moment, they can recognize their equality even if they're on different sides, or they're parallels even if they're on different sides. Whereas, even though we as an audience can see it in The Dark Knight, there's definitely never going to be an acknowledgement about that from Batman.
Yeah. So when we were going over the convoy scene in The Dark Knight, I said there was a part that we were going to get to, and this is the part of it's directly influenced by the cinematography of Heat. So that you've got the aerial shots coming in on the convoy, and in Heat, that middle attempted heist where they're in the truck watching them, it opens with a big aerial of LA, and it comes down onto Val Kilmer's van coming up to where they're going to do the heist. And I think that's a direct influence. And then there's also a shot at the beginning of the convoy scene in The Dark Knight where it has this sunset on the horizon and like dark cars and stuff of the coming night in the foreground. It's very similar to the sunset outside of the parking garage in that parking garage scene, and they have a lot of sunset shots where things have just gotten dark, but there's still a little bit of light on the horizon. Those shots are very hard to get, by the way. You've got they call it magic hour, and it's more like magic half hour or 15 minutes.
I can only imagine how frenetic it must be to shoot those scenes. For the moment.
Yeah, you make sure to get the wides first, and then you go into those close-ups. But, yeah.
One other similarity that stands out is the essence, going back to the diner scene, of how you have the two central figures, the antagonist and the protagonist, who are defined by what they do. This is very overt in the case of The Dark Knight, because they are the Joker, who is so much this identity that, as you pointed out earlier, he has you never see his name. There's never any sense as to who he is. And then, of course, you have the Batman, who is, whose identity is such a plot point in that movie. And while you have McCaffrey and Hannah in Heat, and they're not, wearing masks and alter egos, it's the same thing. They are those roles. And so much of the movie underscores that by their failure in any other capacity. They fail as husbands. They fail as boyfriends.
Yeah.
They are just that. And how there is, with the end, there is the sense of how empty that is.
Right.
That Batman racing away to play that role, that's not, and this goes back to the part of it that I took issue with, but at the same time I respect Nolan's choice, is that, Bruce wanted to be more than that. But at the end of the day, he can't. He's trapped in it. Hannah tried to be more than that. But at the end of the day, he sort of acknowledges who he is and ends up just, being that person, even though by the end of it, he's lost his purpose. The same way that Batman has as well. In effect, he can no longer be Batman because now he is hunted. And so he is forever going to be this person. He has lost any alternative being anything else, but he can't be in the way he wants, just the same way that Hannah can no longer be a hunter because he has hunted his prey to death.
Right.
And so his purpose is over as well.
And that leads into another parallel, which I talked about a little bit. The villain ends up kind of being the leading role of both movies. For Macaulay, it's very direct and very intentional. For Mann, if he made him a very sympathetic character, so you'd be on his side. For Heath Ledger, it's just his performance. Mm-hmm. Like anybody else doing that role, we may not have been so with them. It's not like that there are some people that kind of are on his side, but you can't help but admire just that performance, at least a little bit.
Yeah, what Ledger brings to it is just simply amazing.
Yeah,
and really, it's how so much of the plot is driven by their plans, their planning,
right?
And how the other character, the authority figure, shall we say, Hannah and Batman, are having to constantly interpret what that is and chase. I mean, that's more generic in the sense of that's how a lot of cop crook movies work. But here it is the notion of the master planner who has all these schemes and how they're constantly being attacked. It's definitely taken to an advanced level in Heat, and then of course Nolan ramps up to 11. So
Yeah. So that diner scene, I mean, there's an actual line that has this idea to it in The Dark Knight of he's like, "You complete me," and then there's kind of that feeling in the diner scene of "we're not so different, you and I" thing that they tried to do with that, and then they end it after he shoots him at the end of Heat. He takes his hand as he's dying. Again. It's a movie thing like that. I think in real life, there's no way the cop would do that. But I don't know. Maybe if it was a guy that he was on for so long that he developed that kind of a connection to, maybe. But I think real cops really want to get these guys off the street. They're not like, "Oh, you're my friend because we can relate on this thing." It's like, no, like. They wouldn't be a cop unless they wanted to get them off the street.
But then Hannah isn't necessarily a real cop so much as he's practically like a force of nature.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's a larger than life personality, and Pacino plays him as such.
Yeah,
and so that gets to how, again, I just keep returning to that final scene where you get the sense that even though De Niro, even though Macaulay's the one who's dead, you get the sense of loss comes from Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
In that he's, what has he got at this point? And you could say
that's true.
That's true for Batman at the end. What has he really got at this point, apart from the fact that his symbol's now been corrupted for the greater good, and intentionally so, but it's like, what's he got left? And that's something that Nolan, and again, I'm kind of projecting ahead here, Nolan plays at the beginning of Dark Knight Rises.
Right.
Which is where, he's a recluse and haven't seen Batman in years and so forth.
Yeah. It's interesting. The end of The Dark Knight, I was expecting him to, and it may just have been my teenage brain not understanding exactly the implications of that speech and what happened. I was expecting him to to carry on being Batman at the beginning of the next movie. But he was just hunted by the cops the whole time, and I thought that would be interesting. I just like that image of all the cops chasing him and driving off.
Yeah,
but.
And that's something that I had forgotten about that ending in the second film when I started seeing the third film, and I had missed that. But now that I have that and I've gone back and revisited the second film, I can see it much more. It does make me appreciate the narrative arc that Nolan establishes in the three films.
Yeah.
Which really is a coherent trilogy in a way that I don't even think Marvel had worked up to at that point. I know you definitely don't see
2012 was when they came out with Avengers, and that was when Dark Knight Rises came out. So
yes.
yeah.
So if you go back to 2006, I think it is when Batman Begins is released.
2008. Wait, no, Batman Begins. That was 2005. And then
So
Dark Knight's 2008.
So it's kind of it plays out that if he's been writing it if he's been planning it out since 2005, he's got that arc already in mind, and you don't see that as much in the Spider-Man movies. You don't see it in the X-Men movies. You definitely don't see it in the Superman movies.
Yeah.
And the Batman movies are so darn disjointed.
Yeah.
And you get those two great ones from Nolan, and then it's like, hey, let's go camp.
Yeah.
So.
Or you mean two ones from Burton?
Schumacher. No, I mean the Schumacher ones. Is it Schumacher? Yeah. I'm talking.
You said
Forever.
two ones from Nolan. You meant
Burton? Two ones from Burton.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to our star ratings for Heat. What would you give it?
Oh, for me, it's a 5 out of 5.
Okay.
No question.
Probably going to disappoint you with this one. I'll give it a 3.5. Solid movie. I would definitely rewatch it, and the 3 stars is what I'd give movies that I'd rewatch, but half star is a little bit more. And then for The Dark Knight.
Here's where I'm going to disappoint you. 4 out of 5.
Okay.
I mean,
that's fair.
I have to acknowledge its greatness, but again, I honestly feel it's an overrated movie. And it's maybe it's people give it the accolades it does as a superhero movie, Nolan movie. I'm no doubt there's quality in it, but I just find that there are elements in it that especially when you compare it to Heat. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. Heat is so it's such a complete package, and I feel like there's so much that could be trimmed from The Dark Knight to make it a more effective movie. Not to mention the pacing, as good as Nolan is in terms of moving the story along, it feels like a little too rushed. I feel like I'm as vested in the characters as I could be.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't know how I can't do 5 stars on The Dark Knight. For me, it comes down to the message and the character arc, and it just lands for me so well. And the plotting and all that stuff, I know there's issues, but it's like I don't watch movies like that. I don't pick up on that kind of stuff. But I guess I kind of take it as presented, just the way that boat scene ends and he just defeats Joker, even though every visual, tangible way he's been beaten. Rachel's dead. Harvey has been turned into a bad guy, and he can't be Batman anymore at the end. He's still won, and he's driving off into that light at the end. It's so good.
It actually just occurred to me now, the way you could say it in the end, it's not that Joker's defeated by the Batman.
Yeah.
Joker's defeated by Gotham.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. It's really at the end how he does all this to try to lower Gotham down, and yet even after he's terrified them and traumatized them, they still prove him wrong.
Yeah.
So.
And it'll be interesting to rewatch. Not that I'm saying we're going to do this for Criss Cross, but the next time I see Dark Knight Rises to see how it carries these things through. But yeah, so our next episode of the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast is Bad Day at Black Rock and Yojimbo, both released around 1960, I think.
Well, Bad Day
at Black Rock was 1955, and Yojimbo is 1960. Mm-hmm. So, and I originally thought they were opposite because Yojimbo's black and white and the other one isn't. But it may be interesting pairing. Mark even brought this up. It might be the first thought to compare it to Fistful of Dollars, which I have seen it compared to, but we'll get into. I won't tell you at the moment, but we'll get into the comparison and why I'm choosing to do them this way.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing both those movies because I've seen both of them in the past, and they are just wonderful revisits. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing if I can anticipate what those parallels are.
Yeah, that'll be good. If you like what you heard on today's show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. And that's today's episode of the Criss Cross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet. Because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring it back.
Criss Cross.